Okay, we're now recording.
Good morning. Welcome to the San Mateo County Planning Commission meeting of July 28, 2021. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Gupta,
Here.
Commissioner Santa Cruz,
Here.
Commissioner Henson,
Here.
Commissioner Ramirez,
Here,
Chair Ketchum,
Here.
and staff is represented by Monowitz, Fox, and Montes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is oral communications. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on any subject that is not on today's agenda. Speakers will be limited to 5 minutes. First, staff will explain how the public comment process works for a remote meeting.
Thank you, Chair. We're not opening public comment. If your hand is raised, your name will be called for this item. I will lower your hand after you speak. So for those attending the meeting on the Zoom video conference, we will use the raised hand feature in order to organize any public comments. During the general public comment period and for each item on the regular agenda, I will ask those members of the public who wish to comment to click the raised hand feature to raise your hand to speak on that agenda item. For those joining by phone, please press *9 to indicate you desire to speak. Please note that members of the public must wait for my prompt in connection with each agenda item before using the raised hand function. For example, you cannot raise your hand at the beginning of the meeting for an item that is later in the meeting. When you hear your name called, we will prompt you to unmute your account and you may begin speaking. So right now, I do not see anybody with their hands raised for public comment, and I have not received any additional written comment, Chair.
Okay, I'll wait just a moment. Still no hands. Seeing no requests to speak, if there are no objections, we will close oral communications and move on to the consent agenda, which includes minutes of July 14, 2021. May I have a motion?
so moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Gupta,
Aye.
Commissioner Santa Cruz,
Aye.
Commissioner Henson,
Aye.
Commissioner Ramirez,
Aye,
Chair Ketchum.
Aye. Motion is approved unanimously. So moving on now to the regular agenda, staff will introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. Regular item number 1, owner Z Enterprises LP, applicants Steve and Nicholas Zamay, file number PLN 2014-00410, and the location is 1551 Crystal Springs, San Mateo, and our project planner this morning is Erica Adams.
Okay, good morning, planning commissioners, county staff, and members of the public. My name is Erica Adams, and I'm from the Planning and Building Department. I am the project planner presenting planning case PLN 2014-00410. The project applicants are Steve and Nick Zamay. The Planning Commission is considering adoption of a revised and recirculated mitigated negative declaration and approval of 3 planning permits. I'm going to refer to the neg deck as the initial study moving forward. The subject parcel is 60.3 acres and undeveloped with the exception of a single family residence constructed in 1985 on a septic system. The parcel is bordered by 3 streets, Crystal Springs Road to the west, Polhemus Road to the south, and Parrot Drive to the east. The general plan designation is urban and open space, and the zoning is resource management, RM. Here's some photos of the site. This is the project site from Parrot Drive. This is where the parcels would be located, the new parcels. This is Parrot Drive, just showing photos of housing existing on Parrot Drive. And this is taken down from Crystal Springs Road, showing that you cannot see the project site from the road. So no impacts to this road. The project must comply with many county policies and regulations. Often these regulations and policies overlap. The parcel has an assortment of biological resources, both animal and plant species and/or potential habitat. These were identified during various biological site surveys of the parcel. The markings are, this is a constraints map, and the markings, the little dots are where habitats or species were actually identified. Staff worked with, there are two main features on the property that are noteworthy, and there would be the landslide activity and also plant resources, the riparian vegetation and wetland, and the Franciscan onion. Staff has worked with the applicants to revise the subdivision between 2014 and 2018. Each revision of the project improved the project by minimizing the potential impacts to biological resources, increasing conservation and sensitive habitat, and minimizing geological risk. Neither of the biological resources, the wetlands or the Franciscan onions, are located in the footprint of construction or development. Sorry, on this slide, these are the wetland areas outside of the parcels. And here, this is where the sewer line improvement, the realignment is going to occur. And this would be the Franciscan onion area. It's outside of where that work will occur. An initial study was released in 2017 and revised and re-released in 2020. Each time the comments received during the commenting period were addressed in the updated document. The initial study before you today addresses the latest set of comments as much. Also, it addresses much of the new correspondence to the Planning Commission that's come in over the past couple of days. The key initial study discussion topics are aesthetics, biological resources, hazards and hazardous materials, and utility systems. Usually when presenting, staff will go through the zoning conformance first, but today I'm going to go through the environmental impacts first, since there's a great deal of overlap between that analysis in the initial study and conformance with the general plan and zoning policies. The first area in the CEQA analysis was aesthetics. There is no residential development proposed with this application. However, residential development is anticipated with if the subdivision is approved. So there are two scenic routes adjacent to the parcel, Crystal Springs Road and Polhemus Road. And the proposed development will not be visible from either road due to topography and distance. Parrot Drive is not a scenic resource. However, CEQA does ask to evaluate changes to views from residences and how they'll be impacted. Parrot Drive is a residential street. There are houses on both sides of the street, and there are houses on both sides of the proposed lots. There will be a change to some residences from open space to residential development. However, this is common in residential communities, and therefore there were no significant impacts found pertaining to aesthetics or visual resources with this proposal. Biological resources. As listed in both the initial study and the staff report, numerous evaluations of biological resources of the property have taken place over the years. The primary biological resource are the wetlands, and there are two large areas. There's a 0.42 acre area and a 0.21 acre area. And then the second resource which could be impacted would be, or near construction, would be the Franciscan Onion. The proposed subdivision places wetland areas outside of development zones and parcel boundaries. There is no infrastructure or construction activity proposed within the wetlands. The permanent infrastructure to be installed for the landslide repair would not terminate water flow to the wetlands. And the initial study contains mitigation measures which require pre-site evaluation by a biological expert prior to any site disturbance, training of field staff, establishment of protection zones, and the provision for rules which require outlining which activities require the securing of additional permits from federal and/or state agencies. Staff has found that the project design and implementation of mitigation measures should protect sensitive habitats before, during, and after construction, and that with the mitigation measures, the impacts to biological resources would not be significant. The project has been designed to minimize exposure to areas which have encountered landslide activity. No residential development footprints are in landslide active areas. The geotechnical evaluation and peer review of the site have determined that the landslides can be remediated and that with implementation of geotechnical recommendations, residences could be safely constructed on parcels 1 through 3. The brown area here is the landslide area, and the stitch pier walls are here, and this is the grading that will occur to install that. As you can see, it's outside of the parcel boundaries. The initial geotechnical report in 2014 by Murray Engineers, the applicant's consultant, is based on the following list of reports and analysis: historical maps and aerial photos, reports from other firms, new field work, and soil testing. And both Murray Engineers and Cotton Shires, the county's consultant, have indicated that the stitch pier wall infrastructure is adequate to stabilize the hillside, and when residences are constructed with proper construction techniques which have been identified by the geotechnical consultant and our mitigation measures for the project, that the proposal is safe. These are some of the key statements that were pulled from the reports. And the Zoom is, okay, there. The first one is that the site development was feasible outside of the map slide areas. The second one reads, the planned construction of retaining walls along the upper and lower landslide boundary area located between parcels 1 and 2 will, in our opinion, increase stability to the slope and substantially reduce the potential for landslide feature to step upslope, which could eventually impact stability of Parrot Drive. And the last one, the proposed subdivision is feasible from a geotechnical perspective. Staff determined that the geotechnical evaluation of the site supports that with mitigations, there's not a significant impact from this proposal. Hazards and hazardous materials. The initial study was updated to expand the discussion on fire hazard. The CEQA checklist asks if the project will create a hazard. The project being considered today, the minor subdivision and grading, does not contain any development which creates an increased hazard. Future residential development would be required to adhere to the highest fire protection guidelines, which include designated materials, vegetation clearance, and interior water suppression. This is a map of the fire hazards. The parcel is indicated as SRA, very high, and the surrounding property is LRA, very high. The difference between SRLA and LRA is that one is a state responsibility high fire zone, and the other one is a local responsibility fire hazard zone. The entire area, the entire neighborhood of houses are all in a very high fire district. As I stated, the construction materials and fire suppression methods on the sites within the new residentials will minimize fire hazards. Staff does not determine that the subdivision and or future building of 3 residences would present a significant fire hazard. And then the final CEQA area with significant discussion is the utilities. The new residential development will be served by Crystal Springs County Sanitation District. The district has capacity issues, but it's stated, the district itself has stated that it can serve and will serve 3 new residential parcels. As a condition of service by the district, realignment and rehabilitation to an approximately 203 linear foot portion of the Billy Goat Hills sewer line is required to offset the development's effect on the system by reducing wet weather inflow and infiltration from the district. This is the area that the realignment will occur in. It is located near Crystal Springs Road down at the lower portion of the property. With this mitigation measure, there were no significant impacts to utilities. This is just photographs of the area showing that there is an existing dirt road that is anticipated to be used. The Franciscan onions have been identified and marked off. They had to be marked during their blooming period, so that during May or June, and they were marked in June so that they will not be disturbed during the reconstruction period. Okay, now I'm going to circle back to zoning compliance. The project needs to comply with all of these regulations, general plan, resource management. And when you move away from CEQA, the question, and when you're dealing with the question about significance, the general plan and resource management criteria focus more on protection of resources. Staff has determined that resources are protected through the preservation of 80% of the site by use of infill design and clustering, new development, near existing development, and by not placing it in new undisturbed areas where utilities are not available, and also by placing biological resources and geological hazards outside of areas of development. This is essentially the proposal in color. These are the parcels that are proposed. This is the 9-acre area that contains the existing house, and the rest will be the conservation easement. The applicants are essentially asking to develop 2.1 acres of the parcel, and the rest will remain the same. There were, let's see, similar to the general plan policies for vegetation and wildlife resources, visual quality, urban land use, and natural hazard, the resource management criteria are also similar to the CEQA discussions that we just had. I'm going to just focus on a couple of key RM policies that that should be discussed. The first one is the conservation easement and the density bonus. The staff has determined that the proposal complies with section 6318 and is eligible for the density bonus. The density bonus requires these 2 criteria, placing 80% of the property in a conservation easement and use of building and site design, structural systems, and construction methods to reduce the amount of land being altered from a natural state. Both of these criteria have been met with this proposal. And then the next resource management policy that I will go over is the supplementary review criteria for special hazard areas. And that policy is actually essentially the same as the one in the grading policy, policy 15.2, review criteria for locating development in geotechnical hazard areas. And that policy states that development is allowed in extraordinary circumstances where there are no alternative building sites available. Development in geotechnically hazard and or steeply sloping areas when appropriate structural design measures to ensure safety and to reduce hazardous conditions to an acceptable level are incorporated into the project. So in the RM district, section 6326, supplementary review criteria for special hazard areas, states that landslide susceptibility areas may contain areas suitable for low density residential uses, such as single family detached residential dwellings, if it's demonstrated that these three criteria are met. No other locations less susceptible to hazards are reasonably available on site for development. Through geologic site investigations and adequate engineering design, the proposed locations are suitable for the uses proposed, and that direct damage to such uses or indirect threat to public health and safety would be unlikely. Okay, so the first one I'll take on is the alternatives. Some in the community thought the development should be to the east along Crystal Springs Road. This would violate most of the general plan and RM zoning district policies and criteria that are discussed in the staff report, including scenic resources, infill, clustering, availability of utilities, and vegetation loss. And also, as you can see on the map, most of Crystal Springs also has landslide susceptibility. This map was prepared by the county's geotechnical engineer. We asked her to examine the site and the geotechnical reports and determine if there was an area on the property that was not did not have landslide activity on it. And she identified this area here on the parcel. If we look at that blown up, this is, I took that shape and it's a loose approximation, loosely replicates the area to be considered. But the situation is that this would be accessed by a 10-foot wide easement. That's the only access to the property off of Rainbow. The first situation is that 10 feet is not adequate for a subdivision, as an adequate width for a subdivision. So you would need to have these houses sell land to create access. Then you need a fire truck turnaround here and part of, we'll go back up, part of this area is still under landslide and it's also very steep. I'm not sure that would meet fire truck standards, fire truck turnaround standards. And the sewer district has indicated that they would need to get easements through multiple properties to connect to sewer. Also, versus this site versus the street where all the utilities are right there in front of the property, there would be more trenching and digging to pull the utilities down the hill. So, and this location also has more impact to these properties who will feel like they have development right in their backyard. We did not find that this was an alternative that met the reasonably available portion of an alternative. And we just went over the geotechnical, so I'm not going to go over that again. But the last criteria on this slide was that direct damage to such uses or indirect threat to public health and safety would be unlikely. There's been no indication from staff's analysis that there is a threat to public health and safety from the proposed subdivision and grading and the installation of the stitch pier walls. As I stated earlier, it's actually the opinion of the geotechnical experts that the stitch pier wall is an improvement to public safety. And then for brevity's sake, I'm not going to go through the more straightforward findings for subdivision regulations and grading regulations. They are all found in the staff report. There was one comment that asked about this project being considered under the older subdivision regs, which were in place when the project was submitted and also was originally deemed complete. I did review the new subdivision regs and did not see any new findings that this project would not meet, but the project had been vested under the previous regulations and was determined that it could continue under that. We did not anticipate that it would take this long to get the project to a hearing. So we were thinking, but there's not a significant policy difference that this proposal doesn't achieve. Okay. Okay. So like I said, all of the other findings are in the staff report. And I just want to close out by saying that for 7 years, I've worked with the applicants, the consultants, and reviewing agencies, and have taken community feedback into consideration. There have been site surveys, investigations, and analysis performed to uncover the resources on the property. The initial study has been revised 3 times to determine significant impacts and determine which mitigation measures could best address these impacts. I believe that the proposed project is extraordinarily sensitive to the resources of the land and has adequate safety measures from design, construction techniques, and mitigations. There is a large volume of the community input opposing the project. Many of the comments are not new and have been addressed in the staff report and my presentation today. Some concerns expressed can never really be addressed because they're outside of the scope of what is to be examined for development of the site in an urban area where the utilities are available. And finally, I want to circle back to 2 facts: that 2.1 acres of the 60-acre parcel would be divided into 3 parcels where residences could be constructed, and 80% of the parcel will remain unchanged. The future residences will be built on an existing residential street, and that staff finds this proposal is superior to the alternative locations. So I am recommending that the Planning Commission adopt the revised recirculated initial study and mitigated negative declaration and approve the minor subdivision, resource management permit, and grading permit for PLN 2014-014. I will take any questions and give me a minute to figure out where Zoom is.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Do commissioners have questions for staff? Let's start off with Commissioner Hanson.
Good morning. I got a bunch of questions.
Okay.
So there's identified wetlands on the existing parcel, and the maps I got shows the boundary of the wetlands. But it also, isn't there additional setbacks that go with identifying wetlands?
That's
you-
only in the coastal area. There are not additional setbacks in the, on the bay side.
So we have two sets of rules for the coast side as opposed to the bay side, but it still would be a reasonable, if it's reasonable on the coast side, shouldn't it be also reasonable to assume that we need that on the bay side, even though the rules don't specifically require it?
I'll jump in, Erica,
Sure.
and looking for the question, Commissioner Hanson. So in the coastal zone, of course, we need to comply with this State Coastal Act that has specific requirements and regulations applicable to wetlands. On the bay side, outside the coastal zone, we apply our general plan policies that talk about resource protection. And so absolutely considering the need for buffers in order to maintain the biological productivity of wetlands would be something that would be supported under our general plan policies. So although we don't specify a distance, making sure that we have adequate setbacks is something that we should do under the general plan policies that we're operating under here. And I believe we've achieved that objective. I can't speak to the exact distances of the between the proposed residential parcels and the location of the wetlands, but my assumption is that there's sufficient distance between the two such that the future residential development won't adversely impact the wetlands.
Okay, thank you. So currently there's a failed sewer line, and what caused the sewer line to fail?
The sewer line is subject to, from what I understand from the report, is that when they have extreme wet events, there is some minor landsliding. And there's a portion of the line that's above grade, and that's the area that's been fixed. So it's not completely failed. It's just they monitor it often, and that's on the upper part of the hill.
And so it's not completely, so it has problems, and any reason why it hasn't been fixed, or is this a continuous problem?
That is the district.
In the future?
The district, it knows that it needs to be repaired, and they, from what I understand, they're working on getting funding for that.
How long has it been failed?
Honestly, I don't know the full history of the district. There's some information in the report about that came from the letter from the district, but it's been a problem for a while. So this project, you know, this project doesn't cause any change in that situation, basically.
So they're basically looking for 3 parcels, I presume later to build future residents. Considering the odd topography of the proposed lots, where would the residents sit upon that? Would it be close to the street? Would it have a reasonable setback? Would it be at the end of the lots?
Part of the RM criteria allows for them to have a 20-foot front setback. The county has countywide that if you have greater than 14% slope in the front half of your property, you're able to place your garage closer than the 20-foot, within the 20-foot setback. I can imagine that there would be, you know, that there's still an advantage for having on-site parking to utilize that full 20-foot setback, and so that you'd have parking in your driveway. But there's no design right now, but these are just, you know, speculations.
Yes. Okay. This seems to be an extremely steep area, and Do we have a lot of recent building in areas this steep?
This, I mean, I don't know what the building permits are. I see houses all over the county that are built on lots this steep. My personal lot is that steep. So I'm not, from what I understand, that geotechnically, it's not problematic.
Okay,
And I can speak to that a little bit. I think it's fair to say that much of the undeveloped area of the county hasn't been developed because of certain constraints and difficulties. And so I would say that many of the vacant lots that we currently see being built in the hilly areas, of course, are on fairly steep slopes. So it's pretty common.
when I was out there walking around the proposed lots, I saw what looked like unconsolidated fill done maybe 40, 50, or maybe more years ago, where they dumped loose dirt and concrete. Is that stable? Will that have to be redone? What
You'll
was,
need to talk to the geotechnical. I believe the applicant has their consultant here.
okay. When looking at the landslide maps, the whole area basically is subject to landslides, where some areas are more active than others. But really, there is no area that doesn't have a potential of landslides. Is that a fair statement?
From my reading of the reports, the landslides are shallow and a great deal of them are caused from runoff from the street. So because of the slope, I assume that, yes, there will be things sliding down. But I did not, once again, you can ask the geotechnical expert, but I did not get, from reading the reports, there's not a sense that there are large scale landslides. The report said that there were some active landslides, that there were, the reports talked about how things had not really changed over, I think there's the aerial photos were from the 50s or 60s, and that they hadn't seen significant change on the land. So these are just things that I'm reports. And so you are going to be discuss with the geotechnical expert.
So I didn't have the exact dimensions, so I was just approximating when I was out there, where the road going into those future lots seems to go right through a recently placed fire hydrant. So are we looking to move the fire hydrant, or are we moving the road in the future? Or did I just read it wrong?
I do not know. There are no houses proposed, so I wasn't looking at where driveways are going to be or anything like that. It's just a straight subdivision because, yeah, so.
Okay.
Eric, I can speak to that if you want. As far as
I think that's the applicant, Mr. Zemay. Nick,
proposed building sites, those are just building envelopes where potential development might occur. Not necessarily exactly where the driveways might occur. Obviously, if there's a fire hydrant there, we're not going to move it. We'll just shift the driveway left to right.
Okay.
Well, may I just interject here? It seems as though it's difficult to tell for commissioner questions whether they need to go, who they need to go to. Would it be helpful to have the applicant present and then do all the questions at that time, like we did?
I'm actually done with my questions.
Okay.
So thank you very much. That might be useful, but I'm done for the moment.
Okay, what I would just suggest that as we go through this part here, if the planner doesn't have the answer, then when the applicant does their presentation, at that time, they can answer questions that were not able to be answered until now. Okay, so Commissioner Gupta, would you like to be next?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have some questions. Ms. Adams, thank you for your presentation. I visited the site and it was so easy. As I was driving on Parrot Drive, it was so easy to miss the exact area where we are proposing these 3 parcels. And I would like to mention at this time that Ms. Roberts and one of the neighbors, they helped me find the place. They were the ones I was going to meet there. Okay. And when I got down there, I couldn't see where that parcel was going beyond 2-3 feet. So to me, it looks so steep. And with all the vegetation there, forget about being able to see the end of any of those parcels. So I don't see how it could be visualized that homes can be built. I think this has already been answered after Commissioner Hansen asked about plans. Has it been looked at whether, like what kind of homes will be built there? So my question really is, I'm just kind of putting my thoughts together here. So my question is, how was it determined that this is the right location to build homes? I'm assuming there'll be homes built on these parcels. Is this the question?
It is more of a question for the applicant. I know that I got this project after it had been, there had been previous discussions with the county about locations. And so I think they would be better to discuss their process in getting to this application. This is the only application that was reviewed by me. So I just accepted this application and move forward.
Okay,
And
and
I
this,
think-
sorry.
I was just going to say, I think Ms. Adams summarized some of the key points. The location on an existing street where utilities are available and adjacent to other existing development. So, but to your point, Commissioner Gupta, clearly some modification to the existing landform will be required in order to accommodate future development on these parcels that will be created. And I think the extent of those modifications have not yet been determined, because that will take place when a specific development application for construction of residences are submitted in the future.
Okay, so no feasibility in terms of getting enough land on the parcel to build a residence has been done. No feasibility in that respect.
I would say that the geotechnical studies that have been completed to date have determined that it is feasible to construct homes in a safe manner on the proposed parcels.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Steve. One of the things that I'm moving on to my next question is, one of the things that was mentioned that is taken into consideration there was one alternate site that was shown where not being able to have a fire truck turnaround access was the reason, one of the reasons why that is not a feasible site for 3 possible homes there. So does this one comply? Like, do we see that fire truck access would be there?
It would be straight off the street like the other houses. So they don't need a turnaround because they can just park on the street to access the house.
Sorry, got a call in between.
Okay.
Could you please repeat that?
But they will access the houses from the street on Parrot Drive. They don't need a turnaround because the house is close enough to the street.
Okay, okay. And there's also in one of the correspondence, it's mentioned that even the Parrot Drive in front of these 3 parcels, a supposedly new parcel, is kind of sliding. Is there any mention of that or being brought up in any of the reports?
Public Works went out and looked at the road. They said they didn't see any anything that needed to be addressed. But that's, and I think I mentioned in my report that one of the geotechnical evaluations stated that by putting in the stitch pier walls, you would improve the stability for the road. So if there is a problem by doing nothing, it will continue, but there is an opportunity to improve the stability by stopping the landslide in that area.
Okay. Yeah, it has been mentioned in different places that in the report as well as in the correspondence that we have gotten, that these are active slides. This is an active slide area. Would you agree with that?
Well, that's in the reports. They're active, right? So I would ask you to ask the geotechnical geotechnical consultant what the magnitude, because you can have, I believe that you can have mild active slides and you can have major active slides. And so maybe they can explain what they mean by active slide. But as I stated before, in reading the reports, there was not a large level of concern about the landslide activity on the site as far as it interfering with the development of the homes. And so that was, what I took away from it. I'm not a geotechnical, I don't have a background, so I'm just reading what I can as a layperson from the reports.
Okay. And like this, it's a 60-acre lot, is a sizable lot. And also, even you have mentioned in your presentation, and is there in the report, that from one corner, or if we stand on Parrot Drive and look at the whole parcel, whole 60-acre parcel, we can't see even the one home that is on this big parcel. Is that so? If there are landslides happening, is there a regular monitoring that takes place that we come to know about it, or till it damages something we don't know about it?
I'm gonna just have you refer back to the geotechnical consultant. I would say that it appears that there is not any landslide activity on site that is noticeable to the people living on the site. So that would, give you one level of the type of landslide activity that's occurring. if there is any occurring. So
Okay,
but
okay,
at that level that it's not noticeable to people.
okay. Okay, we'll do that. Last question is, while you have been on this project, have any repairs been done on that lot which was supposed to be number 2, where the slide has taken place, landslide has?
They don't have any approval to do any work on the property. This is the first application for that.
First time, okay. Thank you. No, no questions at this time.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you. Some of my questions have already been answered, but I just want to follow up on some of those. So being that this is such an unstable area, if there was no development to happen, is the county still on the hook to continue to make this area stable on slides and fire, or is this the responsibility of the current owners?
Steve, do you want to answer, or Tim?
I'll
Well,
try.
the answer sort of depends on what we mean by responsible. There are county agencies that do things like, work on fire suppression. From a liability standpoint, if there is a slide that occurs on private property, the county generally does not have a duty to intervene to fix the conditions of private property.
And that would also would include, well, no, I guess on fire, I mean, being that this is a very fire prone area, I mean, I guess the county fire is on the hook to make sure that all of that is taken care of, right?
Well, again, I guess the question is, what do we mean by on the hook? When there's a danger to life and safety, the county intervenes to correct that and minimize the danger. That's different from being responsible for the outcomes. And so the county does not take on the responsibility for dangerous conditions on private property, and does not have a duty essentially to correct dangerous conditions of private property as a general matter. But when there's an emergency, it's usually some kind of county resource, such as a fire department, that gets deployed in order to protect human life and structures, for example, the fire department. So saying someone's on the hook is just a little too vague for me to be able to answer.
Right. Okay. Got it. Thank you. The water and sewer services. So the district, I believe that you're saying that does have capacity, but is pretty much at it's pretty taxed. So how much farther can the district continue to service and add when you look at the overall development that may need to happen around there? Do we have an understanding of that? Are we coming to the very end of the capacity of this district? Where are we at with that?
I can't speak for the district. I mean, I just have the documentation that they have. I believe that they're trying to, through these mitigation measures, as more development occurs, getting, incremental improvements to their system to address some of these concerns. But
yeah, I mean, because I think we should be, very aware that, since we're having more and more droughts and, there's a higher demand as we continue to develop that, make sure that we have enough water for now and in the future. So it would be nice to have some kind of a direct report from them to let us know exactly what we're dealing with.
This
okay.
Actually only the sewer district that has the concern. The water district hasn't offered any concerns. So the sewer and water are separate in this location.
So if we were to develop this area, so do we think that we're actually helping the landslide situation if we just leave it alone?
I only have that one
Yep.
statement from the geotechnical report. I mean, I can't say whether or not, other than that one statement, that's all I have.
All right, no further questions at the moment. Thanks.
Commissioner Santa Cruz.
Okay, Mrs. Allen, since you're referring a lot of questions to the person, the specialist geologist, hopefully you'll answer some of them. Otherwise, we'll move on to call the geologist or the person expert on to clarify some of the further question. Some of my questions are, you were talking about sensitive habitat species that are in the area. Going back to your presentation, can you go back to the slide and show me the overlapping section where the sensitive habitats are in relation to the parcel distribution that we're talking about? Did you hear my question?
I did, hold on, I'm just, sorry, with the Zoom stuff.
Okay.
Now I lost Zoom, hold on. Where did Zoom go? It's hard, let's see, okay, there we go. I had to get to that slide.
Okay, or
Okay, so this is the wetland area. And these are the parcels. And the houses will be up here. I think one of the other commissioners was asking how far it's going to be from this area. So the houses will be obviously not too far down because of the slope. The houses will be in this area, 20 feet back and this. And so this is the wetland area. And the closest that any of the development is the Stitch Pier wall. And so the wetland area basically is some willows, and that riparian vegetation makes it fall into the districts, in the jurisdictions for federal and state agencies. And you are allowed to trim the willows, which may need to occur along here. So you can cut them back. You can't dig them up. Once you dig them up, you now need to get different permits from state and federal agencies. So this is this is what they're proposing. They're hoping not to have to dig, because that means stopping the project and getting different authorizations. So they're hoping just to trim and put in the Stitch Pier walls, and then that would be it. Then there's no more, intersection with the wetlands at all. They put in the Stitch Pier, the smaller one here, the larger one up here.
Okay. And then my second question, Ms. Adams, is regarding section 6326, the criteria number 3, that is stated that is very unlikely. How do people determine the unlikability of a specific project? Like, is that the county or is it the state?
It's part of just the analysis that the planner does. You're looking at the scope of the project. So the scope of the project would be to subdivide the land and create these sub parcels and to do the grading necessary to install Stitch Pier walls. So that's the scope of the project. And then we know that the parcels, the scope of this project, we know that the parcels are going to be, that they're hoping to build houses on them. And so then you look at the scope of building a house and what those, what the impacts of building a house are. So on this parcel, obviously the impacts are related to landslide and landslide susceptibility. And like I said, from reading I just read the geotechnical reports and leave it up to them. And they're, you know, we use the consultant, and then we have a county consultant who peer reviews it to, you know, so that we have two opinions that are in sync, two professional opinions that are in sync. And then I, you know, extrapolated that and wrote the report and said, these professionals are stating that this can be done safely. And that is how I arrived to the conclusion that there is not a threat to public health and safety.
Okay, great. And then one of my, before the last question that I have is the project. In your presentation, I overheard that, or I heard that that the project will need some line connectivity to the Crystal Spring project. But my question is also in another section of your presentation, I heard that I read that the project will use existing homes and be served by the same utilities and road. So how do we connect one with the other? And maybe I'm lost in the interpretation of both.
I'm a little bit confused by your question, but I think you're asking about the existing house and it being on a septic system.
It's in one section of your presentation, I heard that, or I hear you saying that the I don't know if it's the sewer system or the water system will really need a construction of a linear connection to the Crystal Spring,
right?
Something, right?
The proposed parcels would connect to the sewer district, and the sewer district is requiring as a mitigation, as their own mitigation, to that they do some form of improvement to their system, right? So the improvement to their system, the applicants met with the district, and they both arrived at an agreed upon improvement, which would be to improve and realign a 203-foot section of their existing sewer line. So that is, it's kind of like payment, pay to play. So they're going to serve those parcels. This is the requirement, that you upgrade a portion of our system.
Okay, so that's what when you're saying, or when I was reading in your report, it's like this project will be used existing home utilities and road, even though there is like a little update that they needed to do, it will be connected to the existing utilities.
So the system exists, and the system exists, and but to as kind of to get into the system, this is what they're just asking them to do.
Okay, got it. My last question is, in one of the constituents sent an email, they're talking about a policy 1520 that would allow this type of development in extraordinary circumstances. Can you explain, okay, if you can you explain what do they mean by policy 1520?
The policy is the same as when I did the explanation for the RM policy, I said that basically they are the same policy. It's just one's in grading and one's in the resource management. I don't have the exact words, but it's basically, you know, it's very similar to this one, you know, that there's nothing else available. And I think it had a provision about using construction techniques that would ensure that the development would be safe. I think that was part of it. I don't have, like I said, I don't have that statement.
Okay, no, don't worry. I just wanted.
When I went over this, I mentioned that section in the grading regulations was almost exactly like this one. It's just in another part of an ordinance.
Okay, it caught my attention that policy, even though similar to the one, the 6326, it's talking about extraordinary circumstances, that this type of development, it may be approved in extraordinary circumstances. And that's what I
And
thought I'd probably.
they clarify what those are.
Is that it? Commissioner Santa Cruz?
Oh, is that it, Mrs. Adam? I was just
I mean,
waiting.
do you need me to read the entire, I can find the, if you want me to
No,
find.
I don't think that's necessary.
Okay.
I mean, I'll sum up by saying that, our read of the policy referring to extraordinary circumstances, that the criteria listed in up here on the screen, section 6326, those are what make up an extraordinary circumstance. There's no other locations on a site. So that's what it's, an ordinary circumstance would be, you have a nice level site that doesn't have a risk of slide. In this case, we have extraordinary conditions in that we have a highly constrained site, and we're taking the extra steps to make sure that any development be limited to areas that have determined to be safe.
Okay. Thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate you answering my question, Mrs. Adams.
Sure.
I have a couple of questions. And so back to the subdivision regulations. So the chronology in the staff report indicates the application was deemed complete March 11, 2021. So I question why we're not using the 1917 county subdivision regulations as they were updated then. And it seems like it would be much more helpful if we were, because then, as I understand it, the development envelope be shown on the tentative map with the evaluation of the constraints within that envelope. For example, the 7 significant coast live oaks, and it would be, the whole conversation would be much easier, and we wouldn't feel like certain things were deferred to development stage where, this is the time to decide whether this subdivision is done correctly and safely, and to just approve this because we're working off the old subdivision regulations. That's a shame. So why aren't we using the 2017 regulations?
I honestly don't have anything to add then from what I stated earlier. I don't know if Tim wants to.
I'll supplement what you stated earlier. This project was submitted well before the subdivision regulations were updated, and the development footprint analysis that you're speaking of, Chair Ketchum, is a first step in kind of defining your subdivision under the current regulations. And so we just felt that after we had accepted the application and so much time had passed, that to make them go back to that step one wasn't appropriate. That being said, I do think that the technical analyses that have been performed on this subdivision provide us with equivalent information that we would otherwise get under the current regulations. And as Ms. Adams said, we think that all the findings, all the conclusions that have been developed from the technical studies would support a recommendation of approval under the new regulations as well as under the old. So I think that the applicant during their presentation will have an opportunity to address what I believe you're looking for, which is greater specificity about how these lots will be developed, what the footprint size will be, and how those footprints relate to some of the constraints on the site that have been addressed. So I would encourage the applicant to include that information in their presentation.
I think it's particularly helpful for the commissioners at this point to understand that the 7 significant coast live oaks on this very steep slope on the proposed parcels, the impact that the development will have on those trees, which we are told now are not part of this project. So just wanted to make that point. My other question in the staff report on page 7, it refers to the 9-acre portion of the designated remainder parcel, saying that it is likely to accommodate a future residential structure. Could you clarify what development would be allowed under the plan before us? Because I thought additional residential wouldn't be allowed.
I'm sorry, what page?
Page 7 of the staff report.
Let me try first, and Erica, you can
Go for it.
correct me if I'm wrong. So as you mentioned, we have a large remainder parcel, much of which will be encumbered by a conservation easement. However, the existing residence and some of the surrounding area of that residence will not be encumbered by that conservation easement. And I think there's the potential that an additional residence could be built on the same lot where the exit. No? Okay, Erica, you take over.
Yes, sorry. So there's already that house will be using the last density credit. So there won't be another house that's available to be built on that property. But they are, as Steve said, they are outside of the restrictions of the conservation easement.
So this statement on page 7, that's just a mistake. We can ignore that.
I didn't find it. Let me.
The portion of the designated remainder parcel that is likely to accommodate a future residential structure. This is part of the sentence that jumped out at me because, because I thought we were bottomed out on the residential.
Yeah, there's not going to be another house.
Except possibly an ADU.
They could do an ADU.
So in the RM, ADUs are allowed. It's just the RMCZ.
They could do, well, RM, actually, you can have multiple residences if you have the density, but yes, you could do an ADU.
All right, so the conservation, I realize this is actually a third question. The conservation easement discussion mentions that it would be maintained in the natural state, whereas the document itself, the easement document itself, allows ag use, which is pretty broad and vague. It could include land clearing and total change.
Well, all those activities will require review by the county. So anything that they propose would need to be within the, within the understanding of the conservation easement. Go ahead.
So the conservation easement says it allows ag use. That's what the easement says. And yet
Erica, to speak to that.
Applicants, well, we can, maybe I would get to this further. I mean, the applicant could say, oh, well, we're only going to do such and such, but basically what comes down to it is the conservation easement wording itself that governs this. And that's why, and it's in our appendices, and it says it allows ag use, and that could be clearing the whole thing.
I'm willing to revise the staff recommendation and change that easement, assuming the applicant confirms that they have no intention of doing ag, so we can eliminate that as a permitted use if that's
correct, Steve. I think this has been years since we worked on that document, but probably 3 years ago, it was back and forth between the county, and we never had any intention of using the conservation easement for ag use. I think it was just designated to kind of like the large flat area that's surrounding the existing home. And I think we had something in there for trails.
Boilerplate language. I believe that's boilerplate language for our RM easement, because in many areas we do want to encourage ag, but I think this is a different circumstance, so we can remove that from the easement language.
Thank you. So That's all the questions I have at this point. And now it's time for the applicant to speak. You have 15 minutes. Hello,
Sorry, who's this? Who's up?
that's you're up.
Oh, all right, great. So this is Nick Samay. This is the project applicant. I'll be speaking as well as my dad, Steve. I think Steve's hopefully he got the Zoom working. I'm not sure. But so anyway, honorable commissioners, thank you guys for hearing our project today. It's been a really long road to get here, and I think come December it'll be, like Erica said, 7 years since we started the planning phase for these lots, and we're just incredibly thankful to be here and just to have it even at like a place where a decision could be made. So a little bit of history going back. My dad was on the property since the 80s, and he built a house in 83. Shortly after he finished the house, there was an attempt to make a subdivision off of Crystal Springs Road where there was going to be individual driveways for the houses, and they involve all kinds of cutting and driveways, retaining walls, and things like that. And kind of at the last minute, actually, the same meeting, I think the planning director at the time had called me and said, "Hey, we're not going to recommend the project for approval. We'd rather see you cluster the lots somewhere else on the property, basically." So my dad, before I was even born, had gone down this road with the county as far as alternative locations along Crystal Springs Road. And so it was until like about the 2000s that my dad's partner, Ron Beeson, began to investigate the property for a much larger project. That was about 14 lots, and they were planning on annexing it into Hillsborough in order to do that. So we did a lot of studies. I mean, we're talking like the whole property. That's why we have so much information on this property. Is they did biomaps for the entire property, soil reports all over, borings. Every single tree was tagged on the property, and a tentative map was put together for cul-de-sacs and all the capital improvements that would be required in order to access the property off of Crystal Springs Road. And so Ron ended up passing away, unfortunately, so the whole project kind of just stopped. And so we kind of took stock of what we thought would be accepted in a reasonable amount of time and realistic for the RM zone. So that allowed basically 4 lots, and that was based off of the county's internal analysis, the density analysis, which was later reduced under this same application down to the 3 lots that we have today. So a lot of analysis for the larger project. It really allowed us to, going into it, starting this application specifically, it allowed us to look at literally 14 lots. And so we had 5 options really all around the property to look at, and combine that with the soil reports, the biological evaluation, the utilities that were accessible to different parts of the property. We were able to look at all of that and kind of go, there's no guessing involved basically as far as what the constraints were if we were to start with a completely blank slate with no information. So Parrot Drive was the most logical place for the project. And just like Erica had mentioned earlier, I mean, this has all been repeated many times, but utilities are readily available at the street. For our standpoint of building homes and reselling them, I would prefer to build a house with a view rather than down into the dark canyon there where the existing home is at. Downhill lots are inherently easier to build on. I mean, just everything is literally going down the hill as you're working on it. Everything can pretty much be drilled and accessed predominantly from the street or from an adjacent parcel. And a lot of all this translates to is pretty much just less impact for alternative locations on the site. And we're talking, if you're going to go off of Crystal Springs Road, you're going to be having tons of retaining walls. You're going to need septic down there. Tree removal is going to be extensive. If you've ever driven down Crystal Springs Road, just tons of trees, grading, drainage, roadways, sidewalks, and then obviously the utilities that would have to be brought to those sites. So we're avoiding all that. Parrot Drive is the one place on the property where you can just start building right off of the street because everything is there. Some benefits of the project, again, kind of repeating what Erica's already kind of hammered on. We're gonna have a conservation easement. It's not gonna be buildable ever. This is like the end. The whole community will never have to worry about anything else happening on this property ever again, as far as besides what we're proposing to be, obviously built out. And then we're replacing 200 feet of a failed sewer line. Just to answer on one of the commissioner's questions about the sewer line. I mean, it's been almost 20 years that this line has been not fixed or been left partially failed, or I should say temporarily fixed. And there's literally been no effort by the Public Works Department to make a concerted effort to either fund it through property taxes or just to declare an emergency and find the funding somewhere to fix it. It's just been sitting there, and it's actually off of the easement that it's supposed to be on our property. So we're gonna at least get the ball rolling in the direction of getting this thing fixed. Not part of this project is another 800 feet of sewer line. It will also be fixed in conjunction with our 200 feet that's obligated for our project. And that comes from the water tank project that I think the community is pretty familiar with. And then on top of that, like you said, there's that landslide is just below Parrot Drive. I mean, if people are really concerned about the stability of Parrot Drive, that landslide is going to be there whether we fix it or not. So by doing this project, at least we're going to go in there and fix it. I mean, and before any houses are even built, before the lots are recorded, we have to go in and do all that work before we can even submit a building permit. So it will certainly get done before any houses are even proposed. And then the houses themselves provide stability, I think, to the whole hillside. Anytime you're going to be drilling down into bedrock, each house is going to have probably a minimum of 50 to 60 12-inch piers going down, at least minimum 8 to 10 feet in the bedrock, and you add drainage to that, it's going to provide stability. There's just ask any engineer, any soil engineer, it's just a fact. It's going to improve stability of the hillside. And also just to address another, people have been bringing up what the houses might look like. There's pretty much only one way to go about it. The houses are going to be as close to the street as possible and down low as possible. They're going to have definitely probably a 2-car garage that will be at street level. But to minimize, the view impacts, the driveways will be down sloping down the hill. As you drive down to the garage and the plate line of the actual garages themselves, we're going to try to, keep either minimize with flat roofs or just keep it down low as possible where the bulk of the home is down the hill. And that's beneficial because, like everyone said, the lots are steep. So you want the houses not to be cantilevering way out from the street at street level because you have a lot of space to make up below that. So the houses naturally are going to be way down the hill as low as possible. I should say not way down the hill, but just down the hill from the street as close as possible to minimize the framing you have to do to support the actual living space. And then to close, if there's any questions, please ask. Also, all the project consultants are here to answer any technical questions you might have. But the soil engineer, civil engineer, structural, as well as our biological consultant. So with that, we just hope you'll vote to move this project forward. As we mentioned, it's been 7 long years of this process, and we have examined all options, and we have been directed by the county to build in this location on multiple occasions, and we hope that you'll consider it for approval. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do commissioners have follow-up questions for the applicant and his team? We'll start with Commissioner Hanson.
Your presentation answered some of the basic concerns I had as to what the future use of the lots are and how close you plan to get to the streets. And I got what I needed. Thank you.
Commissioner Gupta.
Yes, I have some questions for our applicant. So you said that you are Mr. Zime? Can
That's
I?
correct. This is Nick Zime here.
Right, okay. So Mr. Zime, are you the owner of this parcel, the 60-acre parcel?
No, that'll be my father,
Pardon
Steve
me?
Zime. No, that is my father, Steve Zime. He's the owner of the property.
Father, okay. So do the owners live in that one home that's on this this property?
Not currently, but they did live there for about 10 years.
Okay, okay, all right, okay. So you mentioned some things about the garage would be closer to the street, but the homes would be further down. So there's some kind of feasibility or design that has been thought through about the residences that would be built on these three subdivided lots?
Yeah, absolutely. We certainly have looked at like whether there's actually houses that could be built here. I mean, it's pretty common practice on steep downhill lots for exactly what I described for the driveway to be kind of downward sloping from the street down to a garage, and adjacent to the garage would be a small staircase leading down to the main living space, where that brings the whole home down the hill. I believe we had put together actually a artist rendering of what that would look like. I'm not sure. I didn't see it in any of the reports, but yeah, as far as knowing, yes, houses could be built on this hillside without a doubt. I know 2 or 3 people currently building houses actually across the canyon from this project on the same soil, on the same steepness hillside, and they're doing it right now. So.
Okay. And with this drought getting worse and climate change getting worse, does that change anything for you in terms of your what should I say, methodology of what you'll do, or the how this building will take place, construction will take place?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, luckily we live in California, and so we have the most stringent building codes as far as energy efficiency and just reducing impact overall construction. With climate change, it's not a reason not to continue building homes because people have to live somewhere. But I can assure you that in California, we're doing our part to reduce the overall impact of new construction. And that's through insulation, that's through solar panels, that's through high performance attics, that's through energy efficient appliances, low flush toilets, sinks, etc. So
Okay.
I think it's gonna have to comply with that. So I think we're doing our part.
Okay. And is there any kind of seismic study done on these? Because California is earthquake prone. Is there any fault that runs close to it?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure the question. Yes, when homes are built, there will be further analysis done for the actual house foundations, and at that point, they'll determine the structural engineer will determine, the grade beam size, the pier diameter, the depth of the piers during construction while they're boring these actual holes. John Stillman, if not one of his associates, will be out there actively pulling soil out of every single hole and taking it back to be analyzed, and to make sure that what we're pulling out is what they originally looked at when they did the initial soil report. And so as far as seismic goes, yes, that will be evaluated at the actual home building phase.
Okay, all right, that sounds fair. And you are aware that the homes across on the other side of the canyon on Parrot Drive, some of them have had landslides?
If you're referring, I'm not sure specific project you're referring to. Yeah, I
No,
can't speak to the exact
across the
project.
street. I don't know exactly where, but
I can't, I can't speak to like, everything from the soil engineer to the contractor that was used to the, the analysis that was done by the county. And then, ultimately like how it was maintained afterward. I can't speak to that, but I can speak to how we build houses, and we've done many uphill and downhill homes, and they're all working just fine and people are living in them safely. And so I know that we can build these houses safely and effectively. So.
Okay. All right. And this is a high fire risk area. So is there anything specific that you plan to, so that these are fire resistant, the homes, or what special measures you are considering?
Yeah, you bet. I believe the area of the jurisdiction or the ordinance that governs high fire zones is the urban wildfire or the wildfire urban interface. And so, everywhere, like Erica said, I think like literally half the Bay Area is in that zone. So it's incredibly common practice to, there's many measures. So I mean, everything from using cementitious concrete siding, which is fire resistant, wrapping homes in Type-X 5/8 drywall improves 1-hour ratings for exterior walls. We use a thing called Vulcan vents, which are self-closing vents that seal attic spaces shut, so embers do not ignite the attic spaces. We use fireproof rated roofs, and this is all standard. And then on top of that, all windows are usually tempered. So if in the case of high fire, the window will shatter into many small pieces rather than coming down in sheets. That's just a few of the many different things that we have to comply with as contractors, developers in these high fire zones. And then also not to mention defensible space, and the fire department is going to require minimum distances for brush clearing, logs, grass, things like that.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Zime.
Commissioner Ramirez.
I don't have any additional questions at this time. Thank you.
Commissioner Santa Cruz.
I just have maybe a redundant statement to say and to the applicants that he's talking about that we all have to do our diligent part for solar panel, energy efficiency equipment, but also part of the responsibilities is to make sure that we don't build in areas that are prone to flooding and landsliding. And that's something also to consider. Also, trimming trees and things that create the hazard that we're trying to avoid in California. And that's also part of our responsibilities. So I'm a little bit concerned that this project is located in an area that is prone to landslide and flooding. And that's a high concern for me too. Thank you.
I'd like to make a comment on that. I mean, I respect that opinion, and but I also want just to reassure everyone in this meeting that all these conditions that we're talking about today, they don't stop at the property line. They go throughout the entire area. There's 20 plus houses that back up to this open space that's currently there, and fire hazard. It's not going to be here. It'll be there whether this project happens or not. All I can speak to is what we're going to build is not going to adversely affect the neighborhood. And a matter of fact, it's going to be 100 times safer than what is existing, because back in the day, all they did was push dirt over the hillside, compact it a little bit, and they just poured slabs on fill. Whereas in our situation, we're going to be drilling down very deep and doing extraordinary measures to protect and do it right, to not have issues down the line. And I mean, it's like comparing, a Model T to a Tesla. It's just literally that different from how houses were built back then to how they are built now. So.
Okay, thank you. Now, before we open public comment, I'd like to take a 5-minute break, so we'll return at 10:40. Thank you. Well, we're back. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. It's 10:40. And at this point, we will begin public comment. And I'll turn this portion over to Ms. Lujan.
Can I say something real quick? I have John Stillman, who's on standby. He wanted to answer some of those soil-related questions for the council. He's the with Murray Engineers, the soil engineer.
Okay, I thought we were done with that portion, but if you have some specific questions to answer, we'll take a moment for that. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Well, I think he has to be let into the meeting. He said he was raising his hand several times. I think he's on the call, but maybe as a
He's in the
listener.
attendee portion. What's his name? How does it show up? John S.
John Stillman.
So it shows there's a John S here. Would that be him? Okay.
Likely him, yes.
Yes, that's me.
Okay. So
I apologize. Yeah, my name is John Stillman.
all right. So you were going to answer some questions?
Yeah. Good morning, commissioners. Yeah, I was raising my hand, but I wasn't being called on, so sorry for the confusion. Yeah, thank you for your input and questions. My name is John Stillman from Murray Engineers. I am a principal at this firm with over 30 years experience working in the Bay Area and the geotech engineer of record for this project. Thank you, Erica, for outlining all the our general involvement with this project. But I just wanted to, there was a lot of questions on slope steepness and so forth, but I just wanted to add a statement that to emphasize that there's no mapped landslides on the property that will contain the 3 homes. There is an active, relatively shallow landslide in between the parcels 1 and 3, which will be mitigated by installation of the stitch pier wall system. And in terms of, there's a lot of questions on slope steepness. I'll just, reiterate what Nick had mentioned, that the foundation systems for these buildings will be excavated deep into the ground, 10 to 12 feet. So they'll penetrate through that existing fill material, and then they will be adequately embedded into bedrock with a drill pier system. And, with that combination of excavating down and embedment into competent bedrock, I think it secures the foundation system, and it probably is one of the best locations on the property because the grading is kind of minimal. I know that you have to excavate deep into the ground, but utilities are close by. Like Nick was emphasizing, there was other areas on the property that would require a lot of retaining wall construction and installation of utility systems and so forth. So I think, to try to clarify your questions on slope steepness, what you're really going to do is excavate down deep into the ground and then put a foundation system that's secured into bedrock. So maybe that helps to answer your questions.
Thank you very much.
There was another comment on seismicity and active or potentially active faults. There's no potentially active or active faults on the property. There is the San Andreas Fault, which is off to the southwest. All of these geologic hazards and constraints are discussed in detail in our reports. Also, our report was thoroughly reviewed by a third-party peer reviewer, Cotton Shires and Associates, a very reputable firm, does a lot of work for government entities in the Bay Area. So I just wanted to provide that input as well.
Okay, is that it then?
May I?
Does the council commissioners have any questions for me?
I do,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman. So based on your soil exploration that you've already done, So what are you expecting to, how deep do you expect to go on the foundations for any future houses around here?
Well, that's a good question. It hasn't gone through the building development phase, but based on the renderings that Nick has provided, the developer has provided, the excavations will remove up to 10 or 12 feet of that fill material and basically be founded near the bedrock contact. So I would anticipate drilled foundations 15 to 20 feet deep in certain areas, and that would be needed because of the steep slope conditions, and just to make sure that your bedrock, your foundations are adequately secured with gravitational forces and so forth affecting sloping terrain.
So follow up. So you have done some exploration already as far as drilling, haven't you?
That is correct. There's been a lot of exploration done since on this property since the mid 80s. We're the third consultant taking over on this project. As Nick had relayed, it's been quite a long trek for them, for the developer. But yeah, we performed I believe 6 additional borings. We went sufficiently into bedrock. We determined that the bedrock was competent. We mapped the landslide features on the entire property. That was a request by the geotechnical peer review consultant or geologic peer review consultant. So there is that. I think there was some slides to that effect that Erica had shown. And so with that information, we had noticed there is fill material, as Commissioner Hansen had mentioned, probably placed 30, 40 years ago. But we're not relying on that for support. And I think the benefit of lowering down your houses are you're getting through that material, and then you're able to provide supportive material at a closer depth.
And based on your experience right now on the analysis that you have done, so it's about bedrock is at about 20 feet. It seems a little shallow, but
No, not 20 feet, actually less than that. I would say it varies from 10, from 5 to 15 feet across the site development area. Mm-hmm. However, if we're excavating down through the existing fill, we may end up hitting bedrock at a little relatively shallow depth. So I would say at maybe the basement levels anticipated, although it's a little gray because there's no development plan. I would say that bedrock would be relative, probably within 5 feet of that material. Of that depth.
So the fill that you're talking about, is this what is causing some of the erosion? And that would be right now between 5 and 10 feet deep?
No, so there's an existing fill slope that was generated for, constructed associated with Parrot Drive. So that's the fill that I'm alluding to. Mm-hmm. But typically for natural sloping conditions, you might have some soil develop above the bedrock surface. And, that can vary from, 5 to 8 feet, and then there could be bedrock below, but that depends on the location of where you're drilling. So basically you have existing fill, you've got existing soil, which we're not relying on for support. And then the bedrock below that, which we are relying on for support.
Okay, I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Hansen.
In the not far from Parrot Drive, there was a massive landslide many, many years ago. Is that the same type of soil, or is this we're dealing different types of soil and bedrock?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I know about that landslide, the Scenic Drive landslide. I witnessed it firsthand. It was the storms of 1998. In my opinion, that is a geologically different condition There was many factors that contributed to that landslide movement. They had some fill over some bedrock on the uphill side, but that fill was significantly deep. They also had a cut slope at the base of, I think it was, is that Rainbow Drive? No, it wouldn't be, or maybe a Pohemus, where they had excavated along the toe area of this potential landslide, which was a contributing factor to the failure. So in summary, it's a geologically different condition than what we have presently, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Stillman? Commissioner Gupta, is that a raised finger?
Yes, yes, yes. Before I turn on my microphone, yes. A follow-up question on Commissioner Hansom's question. This other landslide that you two were referring to, is that the one where there were some homes kind of slid down near Polhemus Road? Is that the one?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what was done to repair that landslide? Do you know?
I don't know the specifics. I know that it went through, several lawsuits. It was a very long process, but it was a significant landslide that started from the top of the slope down to the base. So I don't recall the actual landslide repair, but there was obviously some building of retaining walls, some regrading of slopes and so forth. But I don't have any detail on what was actually done, but it was a significant landslide.
Okay, yeah, just curious because some repairs, I don't know how much different those are. Here, we are not talking about any homes that were involved. So, okay, thank you.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, the landslide that is on, in between the lots presently, it was originally mapped. I mean, I found it on a geologic map, a site geologic map by the previous consultant. There's a dirt roadway that it was excavated down to this area. So I think the probable cause was just surface drainage that initiated this slide movement. It's an active landslide, but it hasn't shown a lot of movement over the years. And so the way to mitigate, uphill migration of this landslide would be to build a wall kind of on the top of the slope, which is what we have planned. And then that way it would mitigate any upward migration, particularly when you have Parrot Drive above this area. So that was sort of the intent of this wall system.
Okay, and how long ago was that? This slide on the current project property we are talking about? Yeah,
there's many landslides mapped on the property, but in terms of the 4-lot subdivision on the 60-acre site, but with regard to the 4-lot subdivision, the only information I have is that, we noticed it on a prior consultant map. I think that was a 1983 study. We did some aerial photo review and found that it wasn't there in 46, but thereafter, and I can't remember the specifics. I'll have to go back to the details of our report, but I think it occurred. And maybe Steve, the owner of the property, might even know in particular exactly when, but it was, in the 20th century.
In the
yeah.
Okay.
Probably
so
in the
could have been
50s is what I
ago.
guess, but Steve may know.
Okay. How do I don't know if you would have answers to that, but how are these monitored? Because as we sit here, there may be, it's a large property in my mind.
mhm.
60 acres is a large property. And how do we know about the slides that are taking place?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of these slides that are presently on the property, vary from active to very big, older landslide complexes. On a report kind of indicates that in one of our supplemental letters, but in terms of the monitoring it, essentially these would be homeowners. The only one that, in my opinion, would require more close monitoring would be the active landslide feature that we're mitigating. We have stitch pure walls that are planned, but there could be some movement in between the walls. The intent of this wall system is to protect the uphill migration of the slope. So I suspect that the developer would be monitoring it over a certain duration of time. And some soil movement could occur in between, on the downhill side of this wall system. And if that happens, there might be some minor repairs needed in terms of regrading or refacing the retaining wall system. But
Okay.
in terms of the other landslide features on the 60-acre site, they're so far away that I wouldn't think that they would have an impact on the house sites per se. But let me emphasize that there's always a potential for landsliding on the property. You're living on hillside terrain. What our intent is to try to substantially mitigate the movement, and having these structures close to the road is actually some sense of security in terms of having them and securing them adequately into bedrock, that that you don't have landslides above you. And I also feel like the addition of all these piers and the excavation in the slope will actually be buttressing portions of Parrot Drive where it crosses the footprint, in the area of the footprint of the residences.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stillman.
You're very welcome.
I have a question. You had mentioned that the existing landslide may have been caused or contributed by a previous access road downhill from Parrot Drive. And so as I looked at the plans for the stitch walls, there is a new access drive downhill from Parrot Drive. And, when you look at the map and you see the areas of the disturbance, and yet you don't see how they're going to get there to do all that disturbance. And it seems like a scenario similar to the one that happened years ago before the existing slide. I don't understand how on this slope that's so steep you cannot walk down it, you get down there to put these stitch walls in. You have an insight into that?
Yeah, I can speak to that, John.
Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, currently that road still exists. I drove an excavator down that same road to actually create a little bit of access for John to get down there and drill in that existing landslide. So that exists still. My dad is, run D6s all around this property, and he's gone just straight down that hill. I think he actually drove a Toyota truck right down that hill. So yeah, it's certainly accessible, and with between dozers and excavators and things like that, you could certainly get down there and do the work.
Did he drive his truck back up the hill?
I know he'll be talking at the end here. You can ask him.
All right, now just not serious question. Okay, so any other questions from the commissioners at this point? Okay, seeing none, now we will move on to public comment. And
Thank you all.
Thank you. And I will turn this portion over to Ms. Lujan.
Thank you, Chair. We're now opening public comment for this item. If your hand is raised, your name will be called for this item. I will lower your hand after you speak. Those joining by telephone can press *9 to raise and unraise your hand. Right now I see five hands raised. And the first one I'm gonna, is Lenny Roberts, and Lenny has a PowerPoint presentation that I will go ahead and project for her. So I'll have my timer to the right, to the side. So Lenny, please accept this request, unmute your microphone and begin speaking. You will have 5 minutes and will be notified when the time ends.
Thank you. Can you hear me, commissioners?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Lenny Roberts, speaking for Green Foothills. And I would like to, first of all, thank the staff and the commission for your patience. And this is a very, very challenging project. We are asking that you deny the proposed subdivision for 4 basic reasons. First, the project is inconsistent with the county general plan and resource management district zoning. Second, the property is in a designated very high fire severity zone, and location of the 3 parcels at the top of the property would expose future residents to extraordinary hazards from catastrophic wildfire. Third, the location of the 3 parcels on 30 to 50% and greater landslide prone slopes would expose future homeowners and residents to hazards from landslides and mudslides. And finally, there are feasible alternative locations for the new parcels, despite the assertions by the applicant and the staff. Slide 1 is before you. I'm not going to read that, but that is one of the most key zoning district, RM zoning district regulations that we think you have the authority under to deny the project. Other people will be addressing the geologic and landslide hazards. I will focus on the fire hazard and risk. Could we have slide 2, please? It's notable that this 60-acre parcel, slide 2.
Sorry.
It's notable that this 60-acre parcel is located within a state designated very high fire severity zone, but this designation doesn't adequately describe the particular hazards here. We wanted to know more about the specifics, so Green Foothills engaged Ray Moritz, who is an urban forester and fire ecologist, to assess the project's fire hazard and risk. He visited the property on May 5th, 2021, and provided us with a report, which I sent to you yesterday, along with my written comments. Just to summarize, he concludes that the property's orientation makes it susceptible to the Diablo fire winds that come from the north. Additionally, the canyon's topography with steep slopes and ascending chimney drainages coupled with fire-prone vegetation on the slopes below makes the proposed locations of homes at the top of the property extraordinarily risky. It would put people and property in harm's way and would exacerbate the fire risk to existing homes across Parrott Drive and Tournament Drive and beyond. In other words, to the east of the property, uphill of the property. Could we have slide 3? According to the Santa Barbara County Fire Department, fire burns 10 to 16 times faster uphill due to preheating and radiant heat. Another impeccable source, the County Fire Authority in Victoria, Australia, observes for every 10 degrees of slope, the fire will double its speed, and by increasing its speed, the fire also increases in intensity and significantly exacerbating, increases in intensity, becoming even hotter. Mr. Moritz's report concludes that the proposed development is at an extreme risk to the potential residents and residences of the proposed development and significantly exacerbates the risk to the community as a whole. As the result of climate change, we will be experiencing increased intensity of storm events and mobilization of landslides and flooding, as well as severe drought and increased uncontrollable, devastating wildfires. We need to do everything we can to avoid placing more people and property at risk from these hazards. We can't always prevent new homes from being built on existing legal parcels in very high fire severity zones, but we can and we should prevent creation of new parcels such as these that will place people in harm's way. Could we have slide 4, please? In this case, there are alternative sites for new homes that are less hazardous. One of them is in the 9-acre area that is outlined in red on the subdivision map that is around the existing home at 1551 Crystal Springs Road at the bottom of the property. This area is labeled on the vesting tentative map to remain buildable. Clearly, the developers consider development of this area as feasible. It could accommodate the proposed 3 parcels, and due to the RM zoning, they could use septic systems instead of adding to the failing 1,700 feet of the sewer transmission line, which is above the area, where the applicants propose to replace just 200 feet of the sewer line. There are other possible sites in this area as well. The safer sites along the bottom of the property do not have the more lucrative sweeping views, but safety of residents and property should be your most important consideration. Finally, this is not an infill project, as their protected open space is on at least two sides of each proposed new parcel. Could we have slide 5, please? Next slide. So these are suggested findings for denial, which I'm not going to read. We urge you to deny the proposed subdivision. We've included with our letter some suggesting the findings for denial. There's major public opposition to this subdivision, and we know that you received over 90 emails and letters as of late yesterday afternoon in opposition to this project. Thank you for consideration of our comments.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts. Okay, I will next call on Shlomo Holtzman. Just a second, let me pull up. One moment. Here it is. Okay, Ms. Holtzman, please accept this invitation. Unmute your mic and you may begin speaking.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to voice my objection to this development. Next slide, please. 8 parcels with substantial landslides on the immediate vicinity. 8 parcels. Look at this. What do you think are the chances for more landslides? You don't have to be an expert or prophet to see the future. Who will take the responsibility when a landslide will occur here in 5 or 10 years? There's a big difference between building on top of such a steep slope to building on such a steep slope with such a history of so many landslides around. It is not surprising that in a few hours, over 400 people signed our petition to relocate the development to a better, safer place on this big lot. Next slide, please. Notice the red arrow to an existing landslide on parcel 1 from an older map that somehow is not mentioned anymore. Next slide, please. This is our landslide. It started from the house up the hill in Hillsborough and arrived to our backyard. It took many experts, a lot of work, 125 feet of retaining walls, and more than $200,000 to fix it. Next slide, please. A year after, we had another landslide. Notice the red circle showing groundwater coming from up the hill, in spite of the new drainage system. Next slide. I'm very happy to quote from Muri Engineering. Please read the slide. And this is my response. The developer may agree to take the risk for a financial gain. We will have to live with the consequences. Next slide, please. The report suggests 37% slope. See the red line. It didn't seem right. We took the initiative and brought an engineer to do some measurements. See the diagonal blue line for the actual 61% slope. At some points, we even measured 78% slope. Next slide. Slopes at all 8 points were steeper than 60%. The steep slope continued for at least 50 feet down the hill. I'm not sure if it's even permitted to build on this kind of slopes in San Mateo County. Next slide, please. The difference in steepness have a critical impact on the project, and indeed questions the validity of the project at this location. Most importantly, and this is against what the expert just says, this project will potentially make the land more prone to future landslides. It's a known thing. It's not, you don't have to be an expert to know that, and might have a further impact on the whole area. Next slide, please.
You have 30 seconds.
Combine the actual steepness of this slope with the climate change, and the landslide risk assessment might be revised. Next slide, please. We, the area communities, are very worried about the potential hazard and are not willing to accept these risks. Risks that may cause havoc in our lives and cost the community unnecessary pain and expenses. Please remember your responsibility to protect the public and choose a safer location on this large 60 acres lot. Thank you.
Thank you. One second. Okay, I will next call on Gary Trott. Gary, please accept this invitation, unmute your mic, and you may begin speaking, and you will have 5 minutes as well.
Okay, can you show the first slide?
Yeah, give me a second. Go ahead. Mr. Trott? Mr. Trott, can you hear us?
Did hit the unmute. Sorry, I did hit the unmute at first, but I guess it must not have taken.
There it is.
So my name is Dr. Gary Trott. I live at 1215 Pear Drive across from the 60 acres near the proposed development. I'm very concerned that this project is progressing forward with so many contradictions to the ARM zoning code. The geotech design is focused only on inside the parcels. It's a valid design. They did the math. The math was reviewed by Cotton and Shires, but external elements in landslides and geology were neglected in the design that will result in a hazard to the surrounding public. And I'll demonstrate this with 3 examples. The bedrock for the Styx Pier is not a secure foundation. There are hazardous landslides outside the parcels that have not been addressed, and the subground hydrology has not been addressed. So next slide, let's look at the Palimas slide and what we can learn from that. So in 1997, next slide, please. In 1997, the Palimas slide slipped. You can see the relationship between the ZMA properties and the Palimas landslide. They're in the geologically next door parcel. The map on the left is major landslides caused by 3 years of heavy rain produced by the USGS. The slide on the right is single landslides, smaller landslides that are produced by rainfall. Next slide, please. So this is the Palimas landslide, and it followed industry standard geotech standards. The piers were 3-foot diameters, roughly the same strength as what's in the ZMA project. The depth was 20 to 30 feet. And in fact, the civil engineer installed the piers deeper than the spec. The boreholes had water in, which is a red flag warning to me, similar to the Pear Drive. And it was $25 million in damage. So as non-experts, you can look at this and say, well, the piers didn't break. They slid forward or tipped over. So the pier bottoms were not in bedrock. In fact, the piers were californian surfing on mud. So, that's because of the Franciscan complex, and I'll show you what that is in the next few slides, but the design assumption of bedrock for stable pier foundations is false. Next slide, please. So here is an example of the design volume by Murray Engineering. It's the size of the parcel number 2, but really the USGS map says the potential landslide volume can go all the way up to Tournament Drive. I copied the blue parcel into the red squares and just kind of pasted them over so that the slippage area can be significantly larger than the potential area of the design parameters. Next slide. Now they did the stability calculations. You can see there in case 1, where they combined the materials in the boreholes with a industry standard way and calculated the dry stability, and they calculated the wet stability if it got full of water. And I'm not sure 0.01, if that's close enough to be unstable, because a hill is unstable if it's less than 1. But a chain is only as strong as their weakest link. So why are they using the average of all the links in the chain? They should be looking at the weakest link. The case shown by me using Franciscan complex, it's the weak link. Everybody built a sandcastle on the ocean. What happens when a wave comes to your sandcastle? It just slides away. So the Franciscan complex is composed of boulders that are hard because of the San Andreas Fault rubbing the 2 plates together, boulders that are hard, boulders that are soft, and then some kind of sand or grit or gravel in between. Of course, when water goes through that, it goes through the easiest path, and pretty soon the pier that's in that hard boulder goes surfing downhill. It's like packed cookie crumbs of boulders for different boulders. So, it's not going to be stable against the kind of calculations that they did. Next slide, please.
You have 30 seconds.
Okay, and so this is the boreholes. The boreholes have water. They're 30 feet deep down water. Next slide, please. And so the water comes from uphill. You've seen the landslides in the blue arrows. There's even elderberry going down the hill where the water is going. And that has to keep the wetlands alive. Next slide, please. And all of the geotech structures will change the direction of the water flow down the hillsides, especially with those retaining walls. Next slide.
Your time's up, sir.
So that's my summary. There are alternate sites that do exist with no hazards. Why is the exception allowed to build on a hazardous site? So thank you very much.
Thank you. I will next call on Tanya Leung. Give me a second while I put up her presentation. Okay. Ms. Leung, please accept this invitation, unmute your mic and begin speaking.
Could you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Dr. Tanya Leung. I live on the 3rd house I circled across from lot partial 2. And we've had multiple landslides and multiple retaining wall fixed. Next slide, please. The USGS hazard from landslides says avoid construction on steep slopes and where existing landslides are present. And as you could hear from other speakers that there's existing landslide, and why are we allowing this exception to be built on this dangerous area? Next one. So this is a picture of the La Conchita landslide in Southern California, and landslide could be kill people in a matter of seconds. So why, and I believe the commissioners and myself wouldn't want to pose any living being in such situation. Next. World Health Organization said man-made factors of vulnerability causing landslides include construction of human settlement in landslide-prone area, which this site is. Next. Even San Mateo County states landslide risk can be exacerbated by development, and I really don't want to be buried alive. Next. I'm sure many from the neighbor remembers the Bohemians landslide, which everybody was talking about. Well, just for your information, the actual landslide area just happened to be connected to the ZMA's property, which is a graphic example of unstable nature of this particular property. Next. So this is the actual property map and shows you how this property partial is connected to the Pohemus landslide. Next. So I'm not an engineer, but I know all engineers says everything and everywhere is buildable until something goes wrong. As a dentist, I know and always tell patients that the tooth will fall out if the bone structure is not stable, just like how a home's unstable foundation within the surrounding area will not be able to hold a beautiful home in its position. Next. So this is supposed to be a video that shows the supposedly bedrock. It has a lot of sandstone, such as Gary stated, same thing as our backyards land. It has supposedly bedrock, but these sandstone just crumbles, and it's just like Gary said, it's like cookie crumbles. So next. So other than the landslide risk, there's also fire risk, as Lenny suggested, and the fire department suggested. I know the ZMA said that whether they build or not, there's a fire risk, but why put more people in this risk? Because you already know there's a fire risk. Why allow 3 more homes to be in this situation of the risk? And as this exact site was the actual fire in 1972, it was the biggest fire in the county, and there was a news article about that. Next. The sewer system is a failing over 600 linear feet of only 4-inch PVC pipes that was installed above ground in 1995. And when they did the sewer study in 2003, it was noted that it had significantly deteriorated, and the result is a temporary unmonitored system, which is highly subject to small sewage spills of unknown quantity, quality, and duration. Next. The failing Billy Goat Hill sewer is over 600 linear feet, but the staff report only recommend the 203 linear feet upgrade. So what's going to happen to the remaining failing 400 linear feet? Is taxpayer going to be billed for that? Next. So if you see this slide, the yellow highlights is where the Billy Goat Hill failing sewer is. It's over 600 linear feet, and the repair is in the bottom. And on the right side, you could see the there was 7 documented sewer overflows since 2007. That's when they started to document these. And you can see that there are more overflows along the top than the bottom, where there's going to be supposedly upgrading. The whole Billy Goat Hills needs upgrade, not just the bottom. It is failing even without the 3 new homes that's going to be added to it. Next. Section 632.3 of utilities state that it must be demonstrated that sufficient capacity exists to serve the proposed development. That supposedly 3 partial will still connect to a failing sewer line, which has existing overflows. Therefore, this proposal does not comply with the section on utilities of this partial. Next.
And your time is up.
Finally, RM zoning this is not a unusual circumstance. There's also other alternative sites that's present.
And your time is up.
Thank you.
Okay, and I have one more presentation to project. Their hand is not raised. Is Rafi Holtzman? Just a second. Give me a second. Okay, Mr. Holtzman, please accept this invitation, unmute your mic and begin speaking.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, may I have my slides?
Okay.
I'm Rafi Holtzman, and I'm here to ask the committee to reject this proposal on the current site. Next. Next. Next slide. I'll try to stick to the facts, and the facts are that this is the exact location of the greatest fire in this county. If you actually look at the red framed images, they show a view of what proposed lot number 1, and the lower one is actually a view of the proposed lots 3 and 4. Next. And look at all these landslides. You've seen the pictures, but every house in this area had a landslide. And we know that there are active landslides on at least 2 of those lots. Everybody on this street knows that the driveway is sagging and there is a significant land movement all over this place. Next. And even the consultant who just spoke so nicely is saying, yeah, there are active landslides on lots number 1 and 2. Next slide. And, you know, he's saying owners of the property located in this area must be aware and willing to accept the risk of landslides. Next. The sewer alternative report is mentioning that this hillside, long history of slippage, location of numerous ongoing landslides, and currently appears to be highly unstable in many areas. Next. And we talked enough about the Polimus Road landslide that's just down the road. Next. As you've seen, slopes on these plots are much steeper than the report says. We actually went down and measured it. Next. And then there are some other issues with the report in front of you. It says that, for example, parcel on the east side of Parrot Drive have 20-foot front setback. So we went and measured it. Every one of them has over 40 foot of setbacks. In fact, the one on Hillsdale side have 66 foot length front set. And you're proposing to give these houses 20 feet of setbacks. And what I just heard from the staff is that the garage will be right on the street. It's actually the narrowest part of Parrot Drive, measuring from 24 feet in front of parcel 1 to about 34 feet in front of parcel 2. Next. Allowing this project to have such small setbacks is actually changing the character of this area. It's damaging the cohesion and the aesthetics of this area. We're lowering the standards and having the houses closer and closer to the road, which actually changed the whole area. Next. And there are multiple safer alternatives. Lenny mentioned there's a huge big blue of 9.73 acres that's to remain buildable. Now, my logic says if they remain buildable, they're buildable now. Next. So the facts are that this is a really bad place to build houses on. It's steep, it doesn't integrate well with the neighborhood and the community. There's an evidence, you know, both from the emails you got and the 400 signature we collected in just a few hours, that the community is firmly for moving this development to alternative site. Next. So the main question for this community, are these slopes too dangerous because stiffness, because of the landslide, because of the water? Is the report in front of you really complete, correct, and adequate? And as I've just seen, at least 2 numbers that we picked from this report are not completely in line. And are these really such an extraordinary circumstances that we can't really have other places? Should you consider the community objections? And is this really the only site or just the most lucrative? Next.
You have 30 seconds.
So don't fool yourself. This hearing is going to change the future of Parrot Drive character for generation. We cannot take back those lots because houses will be built on them. And do we really want to build 3 monster mansions on the most unsuitable location against the community will, and just because it's the most lucrative site for this developer? Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I believe that was the last presentation I had. Now moving on to just regular public comment. 1 second. Yeah, we'll next call on caller ending in 8144. Please accept this invitation, unmute your mic and begin speaking. Let me pull up the timer. Caller 8144, can you hear us? Okay, perhaps we'll come back to them. Let me go down to, oh, can you hear us?
Good afternoon, commissioners. This is Steve Zemay. I am the owner of the property. I'd just like to, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. You know, some of the comments were, I like to elaborate a little bit more on this, you know, looking at other areas of the property. I don't know if my son elaborated enough on back in the early 80s, I submitted a map and applications for a minor subdivision. And at the last hour, George Bergman, which was a senior planner, basically brought me in and told me that they weren't going to allow, it was going to actually not allow the project to go on. And the reasons is that in Crystal Springs Road is the scenic corridor. And what I had proposed was individual driveways coming off of Crystal Springs, because if you do anything more than that, you have to have a real 20-foot wide road for a fire truck and a hammerhead or a turnaround. So we did explore all those other avenues, and it was George Bergman that actually suggested that we go up onto Parrot Drive where this could be clustered. The other thing is everybody keeps talking about the steepness of these lots, and apparently the main thing is the Rainbow Drive slide. Even though it slid, 3 of the homes are existing there to this day. They were repaired, that they were drilled to the proper depths. A 4th house was torn down and rebuilt. So they allowed the 3 homes that were in jeopardy of sliding. They were fixed and repaired, and there was a new home built. There's actually homes on Bunker Drive, which was on Bunker Drive, I think there's 4 homes that are on a steep roadway. And if you look at those lots, they're also as steep as what we were proposing. Some of the other things, it's mainly the steepness. Oh, the main thing is about the Billy Goat Hill or Billy Goat sewer line. If we don't go forward with this, the sewer line's not going to be repaired at all. And it was actually Ann Stillman told us that it's going to be passed on to the neighbors. There's 23 people that are using that sewer line, and we would make it 26. So the cost would be spread out, not much, but even so, more so on the remaining amounts of the sewer line that aren't going to be repaired. And in conjunction with the Bel Air project, I believe that a good portion of this is going to be done, except for the elevated parts that are going to require more work on. You know, a lot of the comments were about how the sewer line ended up failing to begin with. It's basically terracotta clay, and it's very susceptible to root infiltration. And what happens when that happens, the pipes start leaking, then the ground starts sagging, and eventually the whole ground moved away from it. And there again, the reason this wasn't our first pick to go up on Rainbow Drive, but on Parrot Drive, excuse me. we would have preferred to build down on Crystal Springs, but because of the restraints and the amount of soil movement between driveways, house pads, septic leach field lines, and then bringing the utilities down, that's exactly what, if you look in the RM zoning, is what they don't want. They want the least amount of disturbance so that the remaining amounts of the land are kept in pristine state. So that's how we ended up on Parrot Drive. I mean, getting back to these giant homes, we are only planning, because of the cost of the foundations, these homes probably won't be much bigger than 2,500 square feet. And that, I like to ask the commissioners to approve the project, because I believe between the foundations and fixing the piers, I believe it will only stabilize the hill more. And I thank you for your time. Thank you.
I will next call on Kathy. Kathy, please accept this invitation, unmute your microphone and begin speaking.
Hi, I don't really need to speak because Steve did. I was just having a backup option. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, then we will jump to Kim Leona Ticas. Please accept this invitation, unmute your microphone and begin speaking.
Thank you very much for listening. And thank you for all those earlier presentations. I would like to also ask that you deny the CMA project to subdivide these lots. It is dangerous. It's in a very high fire zone. And there are other sites for this on this development that are less dangerous and available. So we all know they talked about a landslide in the past, and it's not safe for the lives and the residents in this area and in our county. And San Mateo County has already spent a lot of money in the past on that area in the landslide. So please, I'm asking you please to not allow this development to happen. And thank you for listening, and thank you for taking into account the safety of the San Mateo County residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your comment. I will now move on to Leslie Nicholas. Please accept this invitation, unmute your microphone and begin speaking.
Hello, Planning Commissioners. As President of the San Mateo Highlands Community Association, I respectfully request the Planning Commissioners deny the current ZMA project to subdivide 3 lots along Parrot Drive within the RM zoned open space land, which is designated as very high fire severity zone, the highest fire risk zone. The resource management zoning of this property, section 6324.6, does not allow development on land that is susceptible to landslides, fire, and other features harmful to the health, safety, or welfare of future residents, other property owners, or the community at large. The ZMA project as proposed is not allowed within this RM zoning. As well, it doesn't comply with section 6326. Because there are alternative sites for the 3 lots along the bottom of the ZMA property that are far less hazardous than the developer's location at the top. The developer's vesting tentative subdivision map even includes the 9-acre area around the existing home at 1551 Crystal Springs Road, which is labeled on the map as to remain buildable. We saw that in Erica's map. It was that big blue area. So my one thing, if it says it in the staff report that it's to be developed and it says it on the map too, we cannot today approve that. We can't go with a verbal that is not going to be developed. It must be in writing. That's not acceptable. As well, neighbors all remember the Palomas landslide that occurred within the same USGS geologically mapped landslide that the ZMA project proposed for these 3 lots. These lots are not allowed for development in the RM zoning to protect the best interest of the citizens of San Mateo County. I very much appreciate all the questions from the commissioners today and respectfully request that the county enforce its own safety zoning regulations to protect both current and future residents. Residents expect their government representatives to safeguard both their lives and property as they promised to do when they took their oaths to serve our beautiful county. The lots at the top of the Paul Hemus Landslide Hill were approved by the county. They followed the modern development practices, which includes the stitch pier walls that are proposed for these new lots, and they still failed in the catastrophic landslide in 1997. San Mateo residents, we heard we've paid 25 million of our tax dollars to repair that catastrophe. And so on behalf of the Highlands Community Association residents, I respectfully ask the planning commissioners deny this request for these facts. One, this subdivision is not allowed by RM zoning 6324.6, 6314, 6326. And number two, this is not allowed in the general plan, natural resources policy 15.1. Number three, it's located in the highest fire risk zone, endangering neighborhood lives and property. Number four, there are alternative locations on the Zemay property. And we actually heard from the developer, the owner and the developer, that his first choice was that lower area off of Crystal Springs. I would like to see that explored. And then the number 5 fact that it's not acceptable to have the planning, the developer subdivision map to say that 9 acres was going to be left developable, as well as the staff report says that it's to remain developable in the future. So that would need to be corrected. So I want to thank you, commissioners, for serving our county and community, and thank you for your time today. I appreciate that all the questions you've asked so far. Thank you.
Thank you. I will next call on Laurel Nagel. Please accept the invitation, unmute your microphone and begin speaking.
Okay, can you hear me? I hope.
Yes.
Okay, great. Good morning. I think lots of people have talked about the property itself. So I'd like to actually address something that affects an even broader population, which is how this is going to affect Parrot Drive. That, as Mr. Holtzman's noted, is a narrower portion of the road, and it's less than the standard 36 feet. It's also a major thoroughfare. In fact, about 7 or 8 years ago, I met with residents down there. We were trying to get speed bumps, both down there and up by us, because there are blind spots. As people go too fast, you actually can't see that far ahead of you. We were told that road is so crucial that we couldn't even have speed bumps put on it by the Public Works Department. And my other issue that hasn't been discussed is once you start doing any of this, I know that in meetings past, it was discussed, well, we're gonna build sort of a staging area off the road, but you have to start with bringing in equipment. There's really barely any room for parking given a 20-foot diameter space across the road, let alone trucks, parking, putting all the materials. I just feel like the practicality of this hasn't been worked out. And then again, if that's where all the emergency vehicles go, if such a large population of people are going through there, this is a huge impact just beyond the immediate area. Finally, this whole thing about the pier stitching, reinforcing any potential landslide that would affect the road, makes me think that maybe the road needs to be reinforced and it shouldn't be contingent on approving this proposal. I mean, maybe that's something the county or the Public Works, whoever looks at road safety and long-term infrastructure should be considering. It shouldn't be, we only get a reinforced road if we approve this. So that's, my basic issue on that. Just one other thing. Everyone's talked about fire, and clearly the fire department is really on high alert because there was a kitchen fire about 6 houses down. And I think we had 5 trucks and 1 fire chief come. So clearly this is an area where everyone's on tenterhooks. So I think that needs to very seriously, be taken into consideration. So that's really the point I'll make is I think Parrot Road just isn't a place where you set up a building site where it's so steep. And thank you.
Thank you. I will next call on Kim Rickett. Kim, please accept this invitation, unmute your microphone and begin speaking.
Hi, I'm Kim Rickett. I live at 1625 Ascension Drive. I am not adjacent to the parcel. I am basically speaking today because I'm kind of amazed and appalled at the twisting and backbending and contortions that have gone into trying to get these homes approved in an area that we really shouldn't be building homes in. I do want to point out there's a lot of a discussion. Oh, it's better. Everyone says they can do all the homes at the bottom of the hill. The planning department says you can't do that. There are other options. I understand that the planning department has a directive to try to cluster the buildings. And normally that is a good thing, but also normally building next to or on top of adjacent slides and wetlands is also not something you're supposed to do. So there are other options, such as maybe putting 1 or 2 houses at the top of the slope and 1 or 2 houses at the bottom of the slope, or just not building all 3 houses because perhaps this parcel of land just doesn't have suitable area. I'd like to talk about the landslide, specifically the one between lots 1 and 2. At least with the Ascension Heights development, you had your geotech engineers saying it was the strongest bedrock they've ever seen. These engineers are saying that yes, this contains an active slide, that they have said today there's always potential for landslide. They admit that they haven't done the drilling to determine how deep the piers would have to go because there are no plans for the houses yet. So they don't actually know how far underneath the surface soil the bedrock is. Which again, seems silly to approve homes in a site where you don't know how much is going to have to be done to get them stable. I'll also point out that all of the slides that were fixed by experts have continued to slide. You've heard far too much about the Polhemus slide. Mr. Zemeh said that those houses were rebuilt. I don't know if he's aware, they have continued to sink. One of the houses was on the market for a very long time because it was continuing to slide every year. Also, a similar area, above Los Altos Drive, Parrot Drive is starting to fall down into our homeowners association. We have 2 giant retaining walls that were built, which we've now learned have been degraded due to soil movement and need to be replaced to the tune of almost $1 million. So this is a very active area, not to mention the slides of the neighbors of this particular site. I want to point out that the staff report admits that this will impact the water flow to the protected wetlands. It mentions that the willows will be trimmed and possibly removed. Lot 2 is squeezed in between 2 protected wetlands with absolutely no clearance. In terms of fire, the recommended vegetation clearance is 100 feet from structures in a high fire area, which means that the impact of this development will go out 100 feet to all sides of these existing homes if cleared properly, which means we're going to lose all of those habitat plants, including those in the protected wetlands. I just want you to understand that once you approve this, it sets a process in motion where everything will be done to make this happen. And if that means you need to get federal permits to disrupt and destroy the wetlands, then that's what's going to happen. And if it means you're going to have to clear or relocate the endangered plants, that's what's going to happen. This is absolutely not where we should be building. It's extremely steep. There's an active slide. There's water flowing through the site, protected wetlands, protected plants. But I just keep hearing, but we can't build them anywhere else. But we can't build them anywhere else is not a reason to agree for them to be built in such a risky area. You do have the right to say no. You are the ones who are protecting the community from irresponsible development. So if you think this is too risky, if you think there's a chance that this is going to result in homes that could slide, result in damage to the environment, I urge you to say no to this proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Rickett. I will next call on Media Ipsorvin Byrne. Please accept this invitation, undo your microphone and begin speaking.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Great. Medea is Sporting Byrne. I live 1 block from the proposed site. I want to thank you all for allowing us to speak with you today and express our opposition to this proposed development. I concur with everything that everyone has said. And I would simply like to point out that the fire reports that were quoted in the materials that we saw date from 2015 and 2019. And last year we had what is arguably the worst fire year, especially in this area, in 100 years. Many people have pointed to the 1972 fire that swooped right up that canyon. And, we're in a drought right now, for crying out loud. That's the complete insanity of thinking about building anything in the current environmental dire straits that we're living through. I simply, to me, it's unconscionable to build homes that are in harm's way and that put the neighbors in harm's way, not only from fire danger, but from landslide and from use of resources that are very sparse and are currently being metered and we're being asked to conserve. We don't have enough water for all of these extra homes, for the construction, the use of construction, water during the construction process. It's ill-considered. And, I feel for this maze, I'm sure that that's a property into which they've invested a lot of time and money. Unfortunately, at this point in all of our lives, we have to be thinking about the greater good, and the greater good is to deny this project in its current form. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And lastly, I will call on Janine Pin Yi Wong. Please accept this invitation, unmute your microphone and begin speaking.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, so my name is Pinyi Wong. I live on 1111 Parrot Drive. This is actually directly across from the proposed subdivision between parcels 1 and 2. I'm here today to share with you reasons why I feel you should deny the current proposal as is. As you've already heard today, this area has a history of landslides. The Pohemus Row landslide was brought up, and there was, I guess, the geological individual says those conditions are a little bit different. However, there has been shown that there's been 5 slides just within those homes that are directly across from the parcel. In 2006, there was a landslide on 1103 and my house 1111 and my next door neighbor 1127. And I can say that the conditions are directly across from this parcel would be representative of the subdivision parcel. And so when we talked about landslides, this is not a assumption, it's an actual events that can happen. At the time of the slide, my house was actually yellow tagged, and you can see amount of dirt right up the window. Luckily, in this case, there was no one hurt, but you can imagine the worst can happen as well. There are alternative locations here. We had mentioned there is a partial that is mentioned, 9.27 acres, that is stated that is buildable. And so, you know, if it's buildable later, it's buildable now. So this is not, there's no, I've not heard why this is the best location and what is the extraordinary circumstances that would prevent building elsewhere. We've also heard today that this is a high fire risk zone. It has the highest state designation. So I think it is our it is our responsibility to ensure that any future developments in this area is in a safe location. It's safe for the public. It doesn't do harm to the community, to the future residents that cannot speak because they're not there yet. So I really request that you deny this proposal on really two safety factors. One, that is a very high risk fire danger zone, and that we've already seen a history, and also there are currently active landslides. Just directly across from the parcel, we see that on the house that is across from parcel 3, there was a landslide in 2018. So we're not even talking about history. There's actually currently active landslides in this area. And in parcel 2, we have the developers who's going to need to fix some active landslides there as well. So thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to comment, and I respectfully request that you deny this proposal as it currently stands.
Thank you for your comment. And with that, Chair, I see no more hands raised.
Thank you. Seeing no additional members of the public who wish to speak, if there's no objection, public comment on this item is now closed. Does staff wish to speak to any of the issues raised?
Yes, thank you, Chair Ketchum. And thanks to all the speakers today. Clearly, there's a lot of interest and concern in this project, and rightfully so. I think there's overall agreement that the site is highly constrained and has hazards that need to be addressed. And the primary hazards, as you've heard, include stability, the potential for landslides. And with regard to this hazard, clearly there's a difference of opinion. You have the project developers as well as the county consulting engineers who provided peer review, who've determined that it's not only feasible to build on this site, but actually some of the improvements will help stabilize the site. So the other major hazard you've heard about is fire. And there's a lot of the unincorporated county geographically that falls within designated high fire risks. The county has not established a policy to prohibit development in these areas. Rather, we approach it by minimizing and mitigating those hazards. And one of the ways we do that is by ensuring adequate access. So when we talk about options and alternative sites, when it comes to the fire hazard, it's my opinion that having the homes located on Parrott Drive will provide much better access for the fire response if needed than having them located off Crystal Springs Drive. So a couple other points that were raised, concern about the sewer line. As you've heard with the project, there will be repairs to that sewer line. As far as the length of the repairs, I believe that is calculated based on the actual impact of the project, because you can't ask one developer to pay for infrastructure improvements that is a whole community is dependent on, right? That needs to be a partnership where everybody contributes. This project will specifically mitigate their impact. Okay, so also with regard to setbacks, there was concern about the 20-foot setback versus 40-foot. I checked the zoning for the neighboring community, R1 S8, which allows 20-foot setbacks. So the fact that some homes might have more than 20-foot setbacks is likely based on the topography of their site. It's not a requirement of the county. Addressing the 9-acre portion of the parcel that is listed to remain buildable. I think that's an unfortunate phrase, and I understand the concern of the speakers. As we talked about earlier, that is the portion of the remainder parcel that is not subject to a conservation easement. It is still subject to all the relevant development codes and requirements of the county. And with the use of the available density credits to establish these new lots, the actual development that can be realized on the 9-acre portion of the remaining parcel that's not encumbered by a conservation easement is really very small. As you heard earlier, potentially an accessory dwelling unit, potentially some accessory uses to the existing home, but the potential for that 9-acre parcel to be developed under the current proposal is extremely limited. To the degree the speakers have implied that 9-acre portion, if it's left to is labeled remaining to be buildable, well, then that obviously is a good location, does not respond to the many constraints that we've identified previously, one of the most important being the requirement to protect the Crystal Springs scenic corridor and the amount of improvements required to provide access off that scenic road, retain the slopes, provide on-site sewer treatment would, in my view, result in a project with a much greater impact to the site. With regard to the width of Parrot Drive and concern about using it as a staging area, any use of the road would require an encroachment permit from the Department of Public Works. And if there's a safety concern there, I think it's unlikely that the county would permit the use of Parrot Road as a staging area, and all staging would need to occur on the private property. And then with regard to the 100% clearance requirement from homes and the potential impacts to the adjacent habitats and wetlands, I think it's important for the commission to remember that that's the distance from the home, not from the property boundary. Okay, so it wouldn't be appropriate to assume that clearance would take place 100 feet out from the proposed property lines. It would be from the distance of the home itself, which, as you've heard, will be located as close to Parrot Drive as feasible and in a manner that makes sense. So I believe I've responded to most comments, but I'd be happy to come back to any issues if the commissioners have questions about them. Thank you, Chair.
I have a question. You said that so the county has no policies to prohibit this kind of development and related to fire. And but elsewhere, you know, we're told that the 3 home sites, this is a maximum development potential that you have. Now, does that mean that if the situation is so egregious that maybe you just can't put 3 homes there? Isn't that a choice we have here to make?
Yes, I believe you have discretion in that regard. I'll let Mr. Fox touch on that.
The role of the Planning Commission in relation to applications for subdivisions is to apply the ordinances that are established by the Board of Supervisors and the state of California for the analysis of whether or not the proposal complies with our rules. And so rather than think about it in terms of, do we have the discretion to grant or deny, what I would ask is that we focus the discussion on, if there are concerns, do they align with the available grounds for denial? I believe one of the speakers, Ms. Roberts, had a slide where she proposed findings for denial. Those will be necessary. You're not really being asked to give an up or down vote for whether you like the design. It's really a question of, how do you administer the rules that we have? And if you don't think the proposal fits the existing rules, which rules are we pointing to in order to point out why we made the findings we made in order to sustain them against contrary argument, essentially. So the question of whether or not a different proposal with fewer houses could be approved, but this one, in your judgment, cannot. If we receive a direction to do so, we would have to prepare specific findings for denial and bring them back in order to allow you to make what you believe to be true findings.
Thank you. So we'll move on now to, well, we're in Commissioner comments and deliberation, and I'd like to start with Commissioner Hanson.
Steve, I must have misheard you. So I'm going to condense it down. Are you saying the county's position is pro-development unless prohibited?
I wouldn't put it in those terms. I think Tim Fox said it very well. We are responsible for administrating the rules and regulations for development established by the Board of Supervisors. And so our interest is in applying those rules as best we can. So as we know, those rules give private property owners the ability to undertake certain developments, but they also need to address the constraints and the policies of the county in doing so. So we have concluded that this project has done that, but I'm certainly willing to answer any questions about how we came to that conclusion.
I mean, I can understand if you took this one line item at a time, but my problem is looking at the sum of all parts. You know, when we have an infill on the existing development, sometimes the odd little piece that makes something happen, you have to give up on setbacks or something to make something happen. But it's already a desirable area, a location where you want something. We're looking at a piece of land that is, for lots of reasons, has not been developed when the rest of the Bayside has. And now we're looking, to me, we have, we have a wetlands area, we have water underground, we have failing sewer system. We got the sewer system sitting on the ground because we got landslides, we have steepness, we have old fill, and we have a fire hazard. You know, there's everything that you could throw at it except for a nuclear waste is sitting here saying, you know, we got problems. This is really, to me, not a desirable place to do anything other than what we have been doing there, which is nothing. I don't see any reason to subdivide this. There is nothing that we really gain from it. We just increase our hazards and put more people at risk. And, you know, if we do allow the subdivision of things, we're coming people who's going to ask for variance to be able to make this almost promise that you can develop here to work. And there might be, I just don't want to give variance. I have a real problem giving variances for stuff we don't need to do. So that's my position to the other commissioners.
Commissioner Gupta.
I have many concerns about these, and the main ones being is the active landslide areas and the fire. These are my two main concerns on here. We have been going around I think just at our last meeting, we had this directive basically from CAL FIRE that we expedite, remove the permit requirements, waive the fees, expedite removal of hazardous trees. I'm just taking that as an example to reduce the fire danger. We have so many devastating fires going through our state today, whatever the names are, and they are causing so much havoc. Homes are being destroyed. So we want to avoid that kind of scenario. And with that in mind, I don't see any homes being built on this particular area near the Parrot Drive. And so part of the recommendation that is coming from staff, I'm not going to support I'm just looking at the recommendation, and what we are trying to approve here is I'm not going to support this initial study or the negative declaration for minor subdivision. Resource management, I'm not sure, but if just the grading permit could be done, that is something I could support. So that's where I stand. I'll wait for the other commissioners to comment, and I'm not sure whether what I'm looking at or are proposing, is that something that will come about or not. But as is, I am not in favor of the recommendation that's in front of us. Thank you.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Yeah, I think this project has quite a few situations going against it. I'm not so concerned about the slides, as I believe that with the foundations, the pier foundations and the retaining walls, it would actually improve the stability of the soil and this and the hill on this situation. But I am concerned about everything else. I am concerned about the fire dangers, the wetlands, the sewer. So I'm going to wait and see where we go. But right now, I'm totally undecided as to which way we should take it. So that's my take for the moment.
Commissioner Santa Cruz.
We've been hearing an overwhelming opinion from Mrs. Lenny Robert and all the neighbor and the parties, the interested parties. I'm hearing also tremendous amount of data that's supporting the denial of this project, contradicting information regarding slopes, regarding the extraordinary circumstances, and the section 6324.6F. So based on that information, I am just inclined, as Commissioner Hanson stated in it earlier, that I'm not really supporting this project.
As for me, I disagree with the conclusions in the staff report, and I find the neg deck inadequate, and I cannot make the findings to approve this subdivision. So where does this take us?
If I may, Chair Ketchum, I believe that the best approach would be for the commission to take a vote to direct the staff to return to the commission with findings for denial. So we have an opportunity to put your concerns into words that can be supported if challenged.
Thank you. Would someone like to make that motion?
I'd like to make that motion. Can someone put the motion in the motion as currently stand? Or should I just do?
I think we're asking for to continue the item. So that
no.
Oh, not?
So, my motion, I don't have in front of me right now, but if they can put the motion in front, Janet, I
revised the recommended motion. So the motion that was in the presentation was a recommendation for approval, but based on the feedback that we've gotten from the commission, it appears that there's a majority in favor of moving forward with denial of the application.
Yeah.
And so my recommended motion would be to direct staff to return to the commission with findings, recommended findings for denial.
Okay, well, in my point of view, I would say based on section 6324.6F and section 6326 criteria number 3, I am inclined to deny this project. And that's maybe my motion, if it's okay with the remaining commissioner.
I would prefer to go with Steve's suggestion, if we could.
Right.
So, clarification. So Commissioner Santa Cruz, you're saying instead of having staff come back to us, you're going straight for denial based on those findings?
Yes, exactly.
I'll second his motion.
I would need to see the numbers he's quoting to see what it is to understand
the sections.
Yeah, you mentioned section numbers that you want to deny.
Okay, one was presented by Ms. Lenny Robert, is section 6324.6 parenthesis F, and the other one is section 6326 presented by Mrs. Adam, criteria number 3.
And I'll let Tim jump in to supplement this if necessary, but it's my understanding that of finding a defensible finding requires more than just a reference to a regulation. It needs to be accompanied by substantive evidence demonstrating the specific reasons why the project's in conflict. And that is why I made my recommendation, so we could elaborate the reasons why the project would be in conflict with those regulations.
Yeah, my advice would be to ask staff to bring back proposed findings for denial rather than attempt to do it on the fly in this meeting. But of course, there's a motion and a second. And so what's technically in order, even though it's contrary to the staff recommendation and my recommendation, but what's technically in order is for the chair to call a vote on the motion in the second.
Unless you want to withdraw your second or your motion.
Okay, so Tim,
Pardon?
I'm framing a question to Tim. You highly recommend the opportunity for other reasons than just for denial, but for making sure everything is backed up and staff will come back.
Yes.
Right.
Representing our view.
In essence, my concern is that if the commission takes action today without a staff recommendation and factual findings to support the recommendation, that the decision will be vulnerable not only to appeal to the Board of Supervisors, but also potential legal challenge. So that's the reason why, if you're not going to adopt the staff report, the safest course of action is to ask staff to prepare something that has been vetted and recommended as sustainable against a challenge. So that's why the staff recommendation would be to prepare what we consider to be and recommend to be adequate findings to support the action the commission wants.
Okay, then I will take Tim's advice and withdraw my second.
All right, may we have what I'm asking for now, replacement motion or a new motion?
I will move that we go with Mr. Monowitz's recommendation to find the necessary findings to deny this application.
I'll second it. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Gupta,
Aye.
Commissioner Santa Cruz,
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Commissioner Ramirez,
Aye.
Chair Ketchum.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion approved unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Where are we? Oh, we'll move on now to the director's portion of the meeting.
Yes, thank you, Chair Ketchum and Commissioners. I have no correspondence to report today. I know you were overwhelmed with correspondence regarding the last matter, so nothing in addition to that. With regard to our next meeting, I'm not recommending a study session. We will have at least 2 items, one of them being a general plan conformity request by the County Department of Real Property regarding their proposal to acquire the south parcel of the Big Wave project site. The other item that will be before the commission is whether or not to accept the modifications that were recently adopted by the Coastal Commission to our proposed accessory dwelling unit regulations on the coast side. So as you may recall, this commission voted to recommend adoption of new accessory dwelling unit regulations on the coast side. That, of course, was subject to the Coastal Commission's review and approval. The commission has conditionally approved the amendments with some changes that must be accepted by the county if it is to become effective. So we'll bring those changes back to the commission for your consideration and then bring it to the board. If the county accepts those changes, the LCP amendment will become effective once the commission acknowledges that the county action to accept their changes is legally adequate. Unless there's questions about those 2 items, I'll proceed to the director's report. And I'll keep it brief in the interest of time. Just to very quickly address the issue that Commissioner Santa Cruz brought up. The commission had previously requested an org chart, which has been distributed. And the point that Commissioner Santa Cruz made is it doesn't show the relationship of the department to the commission. And I would say that's because the Planning Commission is an independent body that's been appointed by the Board of Supervisors. And as an independent decision-making body, the Planning Commission evaluates the work that's done by the Planning and Building Department within your area of responsibility. So I would say in looking at the overall county organization, the Planning Commission really is a branch of the Board of Supervisors in its decision-making capacity, not really a department of the county like the staff, like my department and the staff that I oversee are. So there's a big distinction there. Of course, you know, we do our best to be responsive to the Planning Commission's interests and needs, but we are operating within the boundaries of the rules and regulations established by the Board of Supervisors. So I hope that provides some clarification. Commissioner Santa Cruz, is there anything more I might be able to offer on that topic?
No, I was just wondering, because when I was working in the city of San Francisco, the Department of Human Services has a commission, and the commission has a dotted responsibility, like an org chart is a dotted thing, is a dotted line that demonstrated the advisory or assessment or relationship, organizational relationship with the department per se. Exactly the same goes with the Department of Human Resources when it comes to the Civil Service Commission. So that's what I was just wondering, why is that what's the relationship as a planning commissioner with the Department of Building Inspections when it comes to that org chart? But that's my own curiosity.
Understood. So the other two announcements I had was the 4th release of our Excel upgrade project will be going live on Monday. This is a big deal for the department because you will now be able to apply for a brand new residence and a major residential remodel through our online portal. So as you know, we've been expanding our online permitting capability with each phase, and this is really a big step for the department. Finally, just to keep you up to date on board actions, I think I mentioned at the last meeting that an amendment to the Big Wave Development Agreement was going to the board. That was approved by the Board of Supervisors on June 29th. And that concludes my report for today.
Do you commissioners have any questions for Steve or updates?
I just I don't have any questions anymore for Steve, but I just want to let you know to Janet or for you guys that I will be out of the country from August the 7th to August 22nd. I don't know if there's going to be a meeting between those 2 days, but I just want to let you know that I will be out of the country.
Thank you.
Thanks for letting us know. Yes, you'll miss the August 11th meeting.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing no further business, the meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye, everybody. Bye.